Welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham, and it is, of course, what can I say, the 2nd of October. The only thing that's important about that is it's my sister's birthday, so I'll be wishing her a happy birthday sometime during the show. She's in America, so she won't be listening to it live, but she does watch it later on. And that's not breaking news, obviously. We've got loads to talk about this morning because we've got Kemi Badenoch coming out saying she's going to destroy net zero, destroy all the net zero targets, and she's going to come out fighting as a member of the Conservative opposition. However, unfortunately, after this week at Labour Party conference, it would seem that the opposition is reform. It's not really the Conservatives anymore. We'll come back to that. I'll rip up laws on net zero, it says on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. We've got a picture as well of somebody called Anya making a date for a Dior debut. I think somebody's gone a bit mad at the Daily Telegraph. They've used the picture of Anya Taylor-Joy arrives at the Dior show in Paris, where British designer J.W. Anderson made his debut for the fashion house. The Telegraph's head of fashion described it as remarkably confident and wearable. Sorry, have you lost the plot? You know, have you stopped doing news on the Daily Telegraph? What the hell are they thinking? You know, a picture of some woman wearing a sort of, houndstooth jacket. You know, do you not know the world's going to hell in the handcart? Do you not know that the sort of daily grind of refugees and asylum seekers coming here is bringing the country to its knees? Refugees must earn the right to bring families, says Keir Starmer. Apparently they're going to announce today that refugees will not automatically be allowed to bring their families with them. According to Keir Starmer, there will be no golden ticket to settling in the United Kingdom, and he's going to set out some plans about scrapping refugees' automatic rights, which will absolutely destroy and depress the left wing of the party. So we'll bring you that. Front page of The Sun has got some plans for them to actually open up some barracks for migrants. He says the army is standing by to build camps to house migrants in a shake-up of the asylum system. Ministers will today announce dinghy migrants allowed to stay will lose the automatic right to bring family members. You know, they're trying desperately to look as if they're right-wing. They're not right-wing. They've already upset everybody. The Labour government have now decided that actually Keir Starmer's attack on Nigel Farage the other day was completely ill-judged, a misstep, and they wish they hadn't done it. Yesterday, he spent most of the day trying to sort of recant from what he said about Nigel Farage being a racist and about the whole Reform Party actually having racist policies. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. We've got so many things to talk about. Chloe Dobbs is here. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
The big story in the morning, I suppose we should say, though, is about Baroness Bra. Michelle Mone, front page of The Sun, front page of the Daily Telegraph, front page of the Daily Mail as well. Cough up COVID 122 million, it says on the front page of The Sun. Baroness Mone's PPE firm must repay the government over duff kit. They basically sold a load of stuff into the government during COVID, masks, gowns, all sorts of things. And the bra tycoon should quit the Lords, according to Rachel Reeves. Baroness Bra told, hand back our 122 million. Well, I don't think it's going to happen. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. So, Chloe, very good morning to you. For the first time ever, I think, since the last time I can remember it, probably last year, we're not actually talking about the useless Labour government this morning. We're talking about Baroness Bra, as she's known. Michelle Mone, last night under pressure to pay back £122 million the taxpayer wasted on useless COVID kits. This has been going on for quite a long time. There's been all sorts of investigations, finally got into court yesterday, and finally she was told, yeah, you messed up and you shouldn't have done it, and now you have to pay the money back. My problem with this story is that the company that is being forced to pay the money back has been put into administration and only has assets of £600,000. And clever people, clever lawyers, clever business people will say, well, you can't get any money out of that. The best you'll get is maybe £500,000, not 122 million.
Yeah, I mean, £500,000 maybe better than nothing, but nowhere near exactly what's needed. And that is a heck of a lot of taxpayers' money at a time when you've got Rachel Reeves trying to move things around best she can to find a few billion here and there. 122 million is actually a lot of money. I mean, the government wasted so much money on PPE that they didn't even need. They just, I mean, I believe they ordered from this company, that is the Baroness's husband's company, I believe. Yeah. 10 years worth of excess gowns, and they were all supposed to be sterile, and the contract says that
they weren't. The
contract says I think only 1 in a million gowns can fail the test, but they tested 140 gowns to see if they were sterile. 103 failed the test.
But it shows you, doesn't it? It tells you, going all the way back to COVID, because I think many of us have forgotten how bad it was. There was just kind of blind panic going on in government where they just went, right, Oh, have you got any gowns? Right, I'll buy them from you. And they just gave them whatever money they had to buy in these things that they hadn't even tested.
And at the time, interest rates were pretty low.
Yeah.
And so the government thought, oh, borrowing's cheap. We can just splash cash up the walls.
Right.
We can borrow as much as we want. It's fine. It'll be cheap to pay back later. But I think that a lot of the economic problems that we have had post-COVID, I know you've got idiots to say, oh, it's all because of Brexit. No, I think a lot of it is actually to do with how we completely not just spent a load of money, but put the whole economy on halt intentionally. I mean, that's a pretty unprecedented thing to do, is to put yourself into an economic meltdown on purpose. I think it's caused a huge amount of problems.
Totally. Well, they caused massive problems in the economy, massive problems in unemployment and employment. People working from home suddenly started working from home. You know, the schools that damaged young children.
They've messed a lot of people up psychologically, not just young people, but a lot of people who are actually still today struggling with socialising and still getting back to the workplace and a proper way of life.
And people who are frightened of germs and frightened of getting on the public transport.
Oh, I still see it all the time today.
You're kind of going, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, I see people on the tube who have got, I saw someone with multiple masks on the other day. And someone did, you know, because I did post something and say, oh, this is ridiculous. And someone said, oh, it could be someone whose partner is maybe going through cancer treatment. They need to be extra careful. But it's still way more prevalent than it ever was before COVID, seeing people with masks on the tube and of freaking out if anyone comes anywhere near them.
I've got plenty of sympathy for people who say, look, I need to protect myself because I've got a partner who's you know, got various comorbidities and they might be at risk. But the thing we know now, though, is that masks don't work. So
exactly.
It's all very well for you to go, I'm going to wear a mask and go on the tube and I'll be fine. Well, you won't be fine, because actually the mask doesn't protect you from getting a germ that might harm or kill your partner, I'm
especially if it's one of these homemade masks, right? If someone's wearing a proper medical grade mask, maybe it will do a little something.
Maybe.
But when I see people wearing some dirty fabric masks that probably is full of bacteria because they haven't put it in the wash for the past month, I think, are you really doing anything there other than virtue signalling?
Exactly. That is the thing. But the trouble with the story about Michelle Mone is that she's such an unlikable figure that there is literally nobody standing up for her. I'm certainly not going to stand up for her. I know her a little bit. I used to know her when I lived in Scotland, because in Scotland it's a very small pool of sort of so-called celebrity. So you sort of go to these events and she would always be there. But basically, she did an interview, you might remember this, from December of 2023 with the BBC, with her husband, whose name is Doug Barrowman, and they tried to sort of make out that they were being made the scapegoats. And actually, I have some sympathy for her on that, because yes, they were kind of made the scapegoats, because they were the, you know, the obvious face of what looked like a rip-off by people who are making a lot of money. But listen to her saying she hasn't done anything wrong, and tell me that this does not bring a tear to a glass eye.
I can't see what we've done wrong. Doug and the consortium have simply delivered a delivery contract of goods.
Well, here's what you've done wrong, Michelle. You've delivered a contract of goods, but the goods are no bloody good. That's what you've done.
Yeah,
That's like
they basically scammed the government.
Yeah, it's a bit like saying you ordered, you know, 1,000 punnets of strawberries, and we delivered the strawberries. It's not my fault, they're all mouldy. I mean, that's effectively what she's done.
It's like if you buy a backpack off Temu and it comes in the post and it's this size. You see people, they order things off Temu and it comes something completely different.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there are people like us who are absolutely furious about lockdowns and the government control that we have, but there are vast swathes of the public who actually are kind of sympathetic to the government in terms of lockdowns, because they think, oh, we were panicking, we didn't know what to do. Right. You know, they can give them some sympathy, but where they don't give the government much sympathy is where there was a lot of sleaze going on and big contracts being given out to mates, and when you've got the husband of a peer being given such a huge contract, everyone sort of smells something fishy going on.
It doesn't look right. Here she is in the same interview talking about lying to the press.
Saying to the press, I'm not involved to protect my family. Can I just make this clear? It's not a crime. The press have got nothing to do with my family. I was protecting my family. And I think people will realise that in the press attacks that I have gone through since I walked into the House of Lords. I was a very successful individual businesswoman, and since I walked into the House of Lords, it's been a nightmare for my family. So that's not a crime to say to the press, to tell, you know, the press what I did. That's not a crime.
To be clear, what she's defending there is lying to the press, because when they asked her about her involvement in this PPE scandal, she basically told them a whole sort of tissue of lies, which she says was acceptable on the basis that she was protecting her family. Well, not really. You can't, you know, justify lying to people when they're asking you a straight question.
You can decide to give no comment to the press or say, I'm only going to give you limited details. But to lie to the press, I'm sorry, there's no justification for that.
There really isn't, no.
I don't think she's buying anybody's sympathy there.
Nobody is sympathetic. I mean, this is what I'm saying. I mean, it's quite extraordinary because normally, in almost every case, even when you talk about sort of, you know, the most horrendous, hideous criminals, people that have, you know, been serial killers, you know, you can usually find somebody who goes, well, you know, here's a sort of, you know, sort of, I don't know, the narrative that might forgive them for some reason or some way, shape or form. But there is no one who has any sympathy for her because she's such a hideous character. She's literally like, you know, the wicked queen, isn't she?
Yeah, and when someone's clearly very, very rich and very, I mean, she's trying to get sympathy there by talking about how much of a successful businesswoman she is. Right. And although some of us may admire that, I think a lot of people are looking at these two and thinking they have got absolutely loaded on taxpayer cash. Why on earth should we feel sympathetic towards
I mean, to be fair to her, she did make money before that, but a lot of people, I mean, and I knew her, as I say, when she was sort of making her way up into the Ultimo, you know, lingerie kind of business. And it was her husband, really, that built the business up, and she kind of was the front-facing person who was always doing the adverts and who was doing all the kind of PR for it. But it was the husband who was kind of the brains behind it, and she very much benefited from that. But she was a real, you know, icon on the sort of the rubber chicken circuit, if you like, in Scotland when I was living there. And every time you went to a black tie dinner, she'd be sort of a guest of honour, and she was seen as this incredible success story. You know, a woman who had brought herself up from a poor background in the East End of Glasgow, suddenly become a multi-millionaire. You know, and good luck to her. However, it all went horribly wrong, not least because of this, as you say, you know, ripping off the taxpayer. And people don't really forgive that. And, you know, people like her shouldn't be in the House of Lords, and now, of course, the Labour government are saying we should strip her of her peerage.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Probably.
I agree with that. I mean, I know she can say, oh, it's my husband's company, but it seems like they do all their business dealings hand in hand with each other. And there would have been discussions between them. And, well, you know, the suspicion is that they got this contract potentially because she is a peer and because it was a deal for the mates.
And because you were a friend of Michael Gove's, because she sent a message to Michael Gove. This is how it all happened. She sent a text message to Michael Gove and said, oh, I can help you. I've got a lingerie company. We've got these factories in China and the Far East, and we can just, instead of making bras and knickers, we can make gowns. And that's what they did, effectively.
Exactly. So clearly it's been a deal for the mates, which seems very, very sleazy, very typical Tory sleaze.
Very Tory sleaze, yeah.
But we're not talking about... I mean, it almost makes the sleaze about Keir Starmer having the odd pair of glasses here and there seem like a drop in the ocean when you're talking about 122 million quid of taxpayer cash being wasted. That will absolutely infuriate people who quite rightly at the moment are thinking, I'm really struggling to pay my bills, to put the food on the table. I look at my pay packet and I see how much is going to the government. Why should I hand them all this money when it's being wasted on PPE that doesn't it's not even useful?
Well, it also tells you what's wrong with the system, because it shouldn't be allowed to happen. There should be safeguards, you would think, in place. And I know that COVID was an extraordinary situation where nobody really expected it to be what it was. And you know, Boris Johnson's previously said, and so has Matt Hancock, we just kind of, you know, remember Matt Hancock gave a PPE contract to his mate who ran a pub somewhere in, you know, Suffolk, because nobody really knew what was going on, and everybody just went, oh, if you can help us, we'll give you a load of money. And I mean, they were just literally handing money out like confetti. Ridiculous.
I know, and that is what happens when you're spending someone else's money and not your own. And I think this is it's stories like this that really make the taxpayers think, why do I even bother? Why do I even bother going to work? And it makes them so angry when they see so much money going from their payslip. Because people wouldn't mind paying somewhat high taxes if they could see the government spends my money carefully, they spend it well, they spend it effectively, I can get a doctor's appointment.
And they give it to people who deserve to have it.
Exactly. And then when they see stories like this, and they see countless stories day in, day out, every single day we've got a new story about how money is being splashed at the wall on asylum seekers. I mean, one of the latest ones was those taxi rides, right? That was absolutely infuriating. And then you see that the public services we have that they do throw money into, they never seem to get any better. They just seem to get worse. People think, why do I keep paying more and getting less? Why do I even bother? People wouldn't mind it if they saw a little bit more money coming out of their pay packet, if they then genuinely saw the country improve as a consequence. But all they seem to see is these these clowns in charge, just splashing it up the walls wherever.
And how are they so useless at not seeing what everybody else could see, which is clearly, if you were sitting in Downing Street during that period, you might have said to Michelle Mone, well, hang on a minute, you know, how can you suddenly pivot to making these gowns? We won't give you 122 million straight away. What we might do is actually watch and see what the first shipment of gowns is like, and if the gowns are good, we'll give you the money. And that's what would happen in any other commercial situation. But of course, in government situation, they give them the money first and then wait and see how good the stuff is. And you go, that's not how you should be doing it, you complete morons.
Yeah, and as I said before, some people give them an element of sympathy on the basis that we were in a panic, we were in a hurry. So the first lockdown that we did, 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Imagine if it was only 3 weeks, that would have been glorious. But I didn't mind that, because I thought, right, it's a new virus, you don't know what it is, I understand you've got to act quickly. But then after that, I mean, they had so many advisors, so many people involved in trying to figure out what to do with COVID. To continue
and they lied to us as well.
To continue lying to us and making absolutely absurd mistakes, not just on taking away our liberties, but spending all our money away, I think is absolutely unforgivable. And as we've said, it's had real lasting consequences on the economy, on the public purse. We've got, we took money out at a time where there were lower interest rates, but then we've got, our country, for example, has I think it's the highest of any country, the percentage of our debt that is linked to inflation, the interest rate being linked to inflation. And so then when we had inflation creeping up, remember we had it when it was in double digits, I mean, Rishi Sunak was going into an absolute meltdown because he could see that
was because of energy prices,
the debt service payments consequently going up and up and up, because we've got so much debt that is linked to the inflation rate. And so all this debt that we accrued by borrowing all this money during COVID may have been supposedly cheap to borrow at the time, but is now costing us an arm and a leg. And we spend, what, over 100 billion a year just servicing our debt?
Because somebody in the Treasury decided it was a great idea just to keep borrowing money and paying people like Baroness Bra, as she's being called in the papers today. Let's have another look at what she said back in that December interview in 2023 with the BBC. She said, we've done a lot of good for everybody.
If we were to say of anything that we have done, we've done a lot of good, but if we were to say anything that we have done that we are sorry for, and we should have told the press straight up, straight away, nothing to hide. And again, I'm sorry for that, but I wasn't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes.
Really? This is the same woman who just 5 minutes ago said that she lied to the press to protect her family. Now she's saying she should have been more honest with the press because that means that she wouldn't have been scapegoated. I mean, the whole thing is a massive car crash, isn't it? Absolutely ridiculous.
She's clearly clutching at straws in that interview to try and save her reputation.
The thing that's interesting is Labour are trying to make hay out of it as well by saying we're going to give this money back to schools, we're going to put it into hospitals, we're going to put it into...
They're not going to get the money.
One, they're not going to get the money, right, because the company has been put into liquidation and is only worth now 600,000 or so. So they're not going to get 122 million out of that. And apparently, according to people who know about these things, they're going to have to go through the courts to try and then chase her and him independently, and because they'll be indemnified from any losses made by the company. I don't think they'll ever see the money. So it's a massive
they might
story.
try and squeeze some. Maybe they'll lose their house or something.
Well, they've had to
squeeze
sell
a bit of money out of them, but that might only, they might get a few million quid. But
they've had to sell the Lady M yacht, I'm afraid.
Oh,
I don't want you to feel too upset, but they only got 6.8 million for that. I said, it's a bit of a drop in the ocean, literally, if you pardon the pun, for this COVID contract that they owe. 100, they're not going to get. I would say they'll be lucky.
It must be a fancy yacht, though, 6.8 million.
It's not bad, is it? It's a proper sailboat as well. It's not one of those big sort of Russian, type, massive, sort of destroyer-like looking yachts. The huge damage sum is due on October the 15th, and it's not clear from what I can read in the Sun today and various other papers what happens if they don't get the money. Because, I mean, a bit like you and I mean, if you don't pay a debt, you get the bailiffs turning up on your door, knocking on it and going, come on, open the door, we're going to take your, your chairs, your table, you're going to take your bed, we're going to take your kitchen cabinet.
Well, the thing is, it's a bit different if...
They can't do it, can they?
Well, the thing is, it's quite different if it's a limited company owes the money as opposed to an individual.
Exactly.
Because with the limited company, they can take everything that the limited company owns, but they can't. And also, I think in terms of bad credit record and all that, it's all just with the limited company. It's not with you as an individual.
No.
And so
that's why it's a limited company.
Exactly. So they can just close down the company, and that will be that.
And say, well, here's all we've got is £500,000.
Yeah, and that's all they'll get.
We still owe you 121.
Unless they have other assets. So I mean, I know you said they had factories that they were using to make PPE. Were those factories that they were just renting, or do they own these factories and potentially could sell them off and make some cash? I don't know.
It's unlikely they're going to be able to collect any of this money.
Maybe she can sell off the remaining stock of bras that she may have in a warehouse to raise a few quid.
Yeah, amazing. And then you'll get cheap bras flooding the market. It's 6:23. Lots and lots of other stories to do. We're going to talk about Keir Starmer. Don't forget, he's not out of the woods yet because he was quizzed yesterday on all manner of things, including why he doesn't think Donald Trump's a racist, but he does think that Nigel Farage is. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:27. I'm here with Glowy Dogs. We're looking at all the stories on the front pages today. We've looked at Baroness Moan, Baroness Bra, some people would call her. Let's get a voice note from Anna.
Morning, Mike. Hannah, sorry. Reference Baroness Bra. Quite frankly, Mike, with the amount of dishonesty that's going on currently, I don't really care. I don't care too much about Baroness Bra and her dodgy millions. It's a drop in the ocean to what Labour are doing, and the lockdowns are what killed this country, not Baroness Bra. And the lockdowns, left to Labour, we would still all be locked up, all scared of catching a cold, Mike, or scared that our 98-year-old granny might die. Honestly, it's just another dead cat. And coming from someone that's got a cattery, I shouldn't really say those words, but hey.
Listen, Anna, I hear what you're saying, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will say the same thing, but I think the sheer amount of money that we're talking about here, which is why it's a big story, is why it's made the front page. £122 million that the government is trying to recover from Baroness Moan and her husband Doug Barrowman, and I think that is partly why it becomes a massive story. This from Kim, who says, when Baroness Moan said she had a back door to China, was that a new lingerie range she was introducing rather than PPE? I don't know, Kim. I can't answer that question, but thank you for asking it. The problem is that this is just a drop in the ocean. She says that she's been made a bit of a scapegoat, which is to some extent true, because there have been lots of other contracts, like we say, like Matt Hancock giving his mate a contract in a pub in Suffolk. And, the whole corruption of the system, I think, is what the story is really, more than it is about just one individual, Scottish entrepreneur. But, it lays bare the fact that governments, when they don't know what they're doing, do some really, really bad things and cost us an awful lot of money. And, we should get the money back, but we probably won't. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, especially because she's a peer, that's one reason why this is a big story. Right. I don't think it's just the case that there's some specific vendetta against her. And it's not just her that there's been bad press about the contracts. It just so happens this is the big splash.
Well, let's talk
splash
about
today because of this judgment in court.
But let's talk about the House of Lords. Let's talk about the peerage system, because, we've got people like Jackie Smith, who's now a member of the government, but she's a peer. She was given a peerage basically because she was a member of the Labour cabinet under Tony Blair. But let's not forget that she claimed expenses for her husband's porn videos. She claimed expenses for her barbecue furniture that she bought in the garden for a second home, because they kept flipping second homes backwards and forwards. You know, there are people there, Lord Peter Mandelson, you know, what's he doing there? You know, Lord Kempsell, you know, Boris Johnson's mate, who's gone in there at the age of 31 to be a peer. You know, you just think there's something wrong with the system of peerages, isn't there? Yeah,
there clearly is. I mean, I doubt it will ever be abolished. A lot of parties will speak in their manifestos about House of Lords reform, but then when they actually get into government, it's not really the priority, because your average member of the public doesn't really care that much about constitutional matters. But I mean, it's clear to me that if we're going to have a peerage system, that the committee that vets them and decides whether they are appropriate or not, there clearly needs to be some changes on that committee, because people seem to get in for doing nothing if they're just some mate who's helped out the Prime Minister at some point, and not in some sort of way that's helping the community. Well, Michelle Mone got in for services to commerce, you know, which is all very well. Yes, she seems to be a very successful woman in business, but, you know, why should you get a peerage just because you're quite good at your job? Well, we heard that, didn't we hear a Colin Firth's ex-wife ripping up her MBE, and we think, oh, well, why did she get it then? And she says it's for sustainable fashion. I know. And I think, I know I'm talking about MBEs here rather than peerages, but it's just another example of a system where you seem to get awarded for doing something that's not really that admirable. No. If you've cured cancer or something, then fine, you can have an award or you can have a peerage. But just because you've built some bra business, I'm sorry, why does that entitle you to a peerage? I know. And as a peer, I mean, sure, maybe it's good to have people with some business experience in there, but I don't see why specifically having a bra company means that you're able to be the person that vets legislation after it's gone through the House of Commons. I don't think it doesn't necessarily make you a good politician. I don't think there's any secret of the fact there are some Conservative leaders, shall we say, and I think David Cameron was one of them, who was slightly sort of taken aback by a woman who liked wearing a push-up bra and was quite good at selling lingerie, and so I think he probably had some fantasies about that and went, let's put it in the House of Lords and I can have dinner with her every now and again. Pretty privilege. Exactly right. Lots of stories about asylum this morning, because the Times have got automatic rights for refugees to be scrapped. So Keir Starmer has pledged to end a golden ticket for asylum seekers by requiring refugees to earn their right to bring family to Britain and scrapping automatic settlement. Again, this is another one of these stories which sounds good when you read it out, but how exactly are they going to do it? And I'm going to give you a little treat here, because this is Keir Starmer. Yesterday, he went out yesterday to try and do damage control after his ridiculous speech about racism and how the Reform are a racist party. And this is where Beth Rigby, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Beth Rigby's, and she's been very sycophantic towards Keir Starmer lately, but she actually nails him here and tries to get him to admit that maybe if he thinks Nigel Farage is a racist, what about Donald Trump? Check this.
Donald Trump said under Sadiq Khan, London is being driven towards Sharia law, is it?
No, of course it's not.
Okay.
That's nonsense.
Isn't it that racist as well?
Well, it's nonsense.
Isn't it racist to accuse a Muslim mayor of driving London to Sharia law?
I'm not going to start down the road of discussing whether things said by others are racist or not.
Well, you just discussed Nigel Farage having a racist policy, so you literally are discussing that.
I have been really clear that the idea that in London we're introducing Sharia law is rubbish.
Is it racist?
It's rubbish.
Does it not bother you when he says things that you know are not truthful and you won't actually call it out?
Well, what matters to me is that the relationship between the US and the UK on defence and security and intelligence is the closest relationship in the world. It is what helps to keep us safe in this country. And therefore, of course, I work closely with the United States President.
Yeah, but is it racist, Keir? She can't answer the question, because she got him there, didn't she, really well? Because clearly, if it was Nigel Farage who had said there's Sharia law being practised in London, he would have called that racist. But he's so frightened of Donald Trump, he won't call it racist.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the question is a bit dumb in that Islam is not a race. So saying were Trump's comments racist was a bit of an interesting question to go with. But I do like how she got him at the end by saying,
how she traps him.
Yeah, exactly. How he said, oh, I'm not going to comment on whether things are racist or not, rather than actually addressing the question properly. And she says, well, yes, you have. Right. Because you've done the same before. It's
exactly.
It's too little, too late. Well, you can't pretend that he didn't say it anymore.
You can also make the same argument about his claim that Nigel Farage's policy is racist, because he's assuming that Nigel Farage's policy about immigration is all about people with different coloured skin. It's not. because people come here from Albania, people come here from, you know, Eastern Europe, people come here from other countries in the world where the majority of the population is white, and it's not got nothing to do with race. It's got everything to do with people coming here illegally and trying to live here when they don't have the right to do so. Nothing to do with what colour their skin is.
Exactly. Well, one thing that infuriated me listening to snippets of Keir Starmer's speeches at conference, and also the interview he did where he said that Nigel Farage's policy is racist, is that he was simply lying about what Nigel Farage's policies were. Not only was he suggesting that it was about the colour of people's skin, but he was also saying, oh, Reform's policy on indefinite leave to remain, what they're going to do is they're going to kick out all the hard-working doctors, nurses and teachers who have come here and contributed to this country, made life here. No, they're not.
No.
They're saying that if you speak English and you work a job rather than live on benefits, you can stay.
Right.
Doctors, nurses and teachers, I assume that they all speak English, I hope so, and they're also earning a wage. They'll get to stay. So he's simply lying about Reform's policies. They also were going at it saying that Reform are going to make you pay for the NHS. They've been doing this for ages. They've been putting out all sorts of graphics on their social media about how much it's going to cost to get your appendix fixed if Reform are in power, or it's going to cost you 15 grand.
More lies.
Reform say that the NHS will always be free at the point of use. Now, they may decide to bring in some private contracting, but it will always be free at the point of use. So it's just a lie.
Which, by the way, the NHS is already doing. You know, they've already got loads of private contracts. I mean, there are more people being sent to private hospitals now under the NHS's kind of, you know, auspices than ever before, because the NHS knows that they can't handle putting people into their own hospitals. So there's already all sorts of contracts going on between private healthcare providers and the NHS. So it's all completely disingenuous. It really is. But again, we've got Keir Starmer trying to, on the one hand, you know, sort of assuage the people on the right wing of the party who are worried about him losing votes to Reform, while at the same time trying to assuage the left wing of the party and saying, oh, we really like refugees, but there are some people that we don't like, so we have to be really careful about who we let into the country. So what they're doing, basically, is copying Reform policy, while at the same time trying to pretend that Reform policy is racist. It makes no sense.
Yes, it seems to me that their strategy is call Reform's policies racist and then copy them. I mean, I was so confused when just after he had called their policies racist, I then look at the Monday morning, that was on Sunday, right? He said, I then look at the Monday morning front pages and I see Labour's policy announcements on immigration, and I think, is this a Reform announcement or is this a Labour announcement? Because it sounds almost exactly the same on their policies on indefinite leave to remain, saying you need to speak English and you need to earn money and you need to be contributing in order to stay here. I mean, there were some differences, right, in that Reform are thinking of looking backwards at people who already have indefinite leave to remain, but the differences were quite nuanced. They're saying almost exactly the same things as Reform, and then they're coming out today with more things. So we're hearing that they are going to try to build all these camps, put them in army barracks rather than hotels.
Yeah, that's on the
I
front
mean,
page of The
Labour
Sun,
would have been kicking and screaming on the opposition benches. I mean, they said that the RAF, Wethersfield, those bases, those needed to be closed down, or it's too inhumane. And we know that none of this is going to happen. And then they've said, oh, you're going to lose your right to bring any family members here if you're a refugee, and also if you come here as a supposed refugee and then you're not earning enough money and contributing, we might send you back. So they've put out all these policies that sound tough, but the reality is, so long as we are still listening to human rights laws, as long as we're still a member of the ECHR, it's not going to happen. And Daniel Hannan has done a good piece in The Sun today, where he is saying Keir Starmer will never do what it takes to sort out the immigration problem. He is a human rights lawyer. I believe he said along the lines of, there will never be a world in which being a human rights lawyer will not be a huge part of my life. That is what he's built his career on. Is he suddenly going to leave the ECHR and say, oh, we can ignore human rights law if it says this person needs to stay, if it says they've got a right to a family life, if it says they might suffer persecution if we send them home? No. Keir Starmer is never going to do it.
But he's effectively trying to say today that the right to a family life and the right to bring your family with you into Britain if you come here as a refugee is going to be over. I doubt very much if that's actually going to happen.
No, we know it's not going to happen. There's no way, because even if the government say this is what we want to do, the lawyers and the judges will stop them unless you change the law and you leave the ECHR, you leave the UN Refugee Convention. they're going to stop you. The judges will stop you. We've got an activist judiciary.
Yeah, and unfortunately so. Let's get a voice note from Darren on the attacks on reform.
Morning, Mike. Darren from Suffolk. Great show as ever. I just wanted to let you know, Mike, wherever we are in the world, we're always listening to the home of common sense. I'm just sailing around the Greek islands at the moment, in the gym, listening to Mike Graham yesterday, catching up, and now listening to the home of common sense. Can I just say that these Labour people, when you read lip, it's like, how long can we keep this nonsense going? It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they call Nigel Farage a racist, extremist, and then McMoog gets up and she does exactly the same, exactly verbatim, the strategy. So she must be a racist too then, surely. Have a lovely day, Mike.
Darren, what a lovely message, and thank you so much. Sailing around the Greek islands sounds nice, doesn't it? He stops off in the gym, he's listening to us, this is what goes on. The home of common sense goes worldwide. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about net zero and Ed Miliband, because he's been in the news lately, and also we're going to find out what exactly has been said about what we're going to be doing and getting energy from going forward. This from Tash in Bexhill. Good morning, Mike. So Labour thought they were going to get some money back from the Conservative Duff orders, and Labour says where they intend to put it. Still spending and not paying the debt. Typical. Great show. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Tash. We'll be back with more coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:44. I think by the time we're nearly finished with the first hour. Chloe Dobbs is here. How about this? I keep hearing how rich Michelle moaned and her husband are, says Claire, but I can't get out of my head is Doug's incredibly ill-fitting shirt when they did that interview. A small, pointless observation, but it's always in my head. It's a good point. You know, this is a woman who's supposed to be at the height of fashion, albeit, you know, fashion that you wear under your shirt, lingerie, but, yeah, he doesn't look like he dresses terribly well, does he, John Barrowman? And you'd think if she were married to Michelle Mone, she would be one of those women that would go, you can't go out looking like that. What's wrong with you, man? This from Anne in Devon, who says, hi, Mike, if a company CEO wasted millions on a contract that turned out to be dodgy, the CEO would be at fault. Surely, therefore, the buck stops with Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. Labour are just taking advantage of this mess to sound tough. probably some truth in that, actually. Let's talk about wind power, because Britain blows £1 billion on turning off turbines during high winds, it says here on the front page of the Times. Just before we get into that, though, Chloe, here's a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Chloe. Now, I'm getting so infuriated, Mike. I know I bang on about this a lot, but the fact hard-working Brits like yourself, like me, like Chloe, and a lot of people are honestly, Mike, they're getting so cheesed off with these people running the country, Mike. We are paying these people to run the country and make our lives better. And what they are doing, Mike, is quite absolutely scandalous. I mean, Starmer, scandal after scandal. He seems to wriggle his way off that fishing hook, Mike. But I just can't believe it, Mike. And Lammy, after all them comments he said about Farage and the Hitler Youth, why is the mainstream media not pushed about that? Also, Starmer and the donkey scandal. Unbelievable, Mike. We have to pay these people. Anyway, Mike, enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers, mate.
James, thank you very much indeed. James speaks for an awful lot of people. People are just fed up to the back teeth of the way this government is running the country. One blunder after another, one scandal after another, and then they've got the absolute temerity to start calling everybody racist because they don't agree with them.
I know. It was an absolute blunder for Keir Starmer to do that, and I think he thought they've put together this whole team now in Number 10 of people to combat reform, and someone clearly
it's not working.
Someone clearly thought there, if we call their policies racist and then copy their policies, that is the way to combat the Reform Party. No, it's an absolute. Even if he genuinely thinks reform is racist and their supporters are racist and their policies are racist, keep that to yourself, Keir Starmer, because to say that out loud, I mean, it may have been a bit of a slip of the tongue there in that interview, but then we had Shabana Mahmood say he's worse than racist, David Lammy with his Hitler Youth comment. They can't seem to keep their mouth shut. What that does is it sends a message to everybody supporting reform. Even if you were trying to just say you thought something about a specific policy, it clearly sends the message to everyone supporting reform that Keir Starmer thinks that they are racist.
Well, and I mean, the Mail today have got a big headline across pages 8, 10 and 11. Starmer's attack on Farage backfires. Dan Hodges writing a piece, and he says, why Labour ministers say the Prime Minister's speech was a final fatal blunder, and party plunges in the polls as the Prime Minister ramps up his words of reform. So there's no question that he got it completely wrong. The people behind him are now realising they've got it completely wrong. And just to add insult to injury, let's move on to this wind turbine story. Energy bill payers have spent a record £1 billion this year to switch off wind turbines because of flaws in the UK's drive for net zero. Ed Miliband, of course, yesterday was making all sorts of noises about all sorts of things. Here he is talking about Elon Musk. Check this out.
Elon Musk. Elon Musk. He incites violence on our streets. He calls for the overthrow of our elected government. He's an enabler of disinformation through X. He thinks he can tell us how to run Britain. Conference. We have a message for Elon Musk. Get the hell out of our politics and our country.
He's not in the country.
He's not in the country. Ed Miliband also has an account on X, which he keeps posting on. If he doesn't like Elon Musk, why does he do that? Because he's making money for the guy. And also, Ed Miliband trying to look hard and, threatening is about as scary as, your pet rabbit running at you.
Yeah, it sounded like that was his best attempt there of putting on a serious
Take the hell out of her! Sorry, sit down, mate, for God's sake.
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk is not without his flaws. I think he often goes on some very crazy rants on X, and I don't like how he's decided to go on a bit of a rampage against Farage and is saying, he's not the man. So it clearly shows that maybe he doesn't quite understand our politics.
No, I don't think he does.
Yeah, but he's allowed an opinion. He can say what he wants. If we want to say... I mean, the great thing about X is that we all have free speech on it now. And if we want to say silly things, we can say silly things.
Well, Ed Miliband talks about disinformation and people giving out disinformation. He's one of the greatest purveyors of disinformation. We're still waiting for £300 off that he said we were going to get when they got in on our energy bills, which still hasn't happened. I
mean, we've been talking about COVID a lot in the show because of the contract story. Remember in COVID, when you could have your Twitter account banned, taken down, and all your posts removed if you questioned vaccines or masks. And then now...
talkTV had our account taken down off of YouTube. because of some things that were said that they didn't like.
Yeah, there was a huge censorship campaign. So that's what happens when you allow governments to try to stop the spread of disinformation online. Let everyone say what they want, and we can figure out. And you know what's really good is the community notes and the the Grok AI on X that will help verify whether things are right or wrong. Because people do often share stupid stuff and put a title on it that isn't necessarily
but some
true.
of the biggest purveyors of misinformation are governments. No question about that.
Exactly.
That's what they do. You know, it's not just us. Let's have a look at this. This is Trump and Starmer at Turnberry. This is when Trump visited this country earlier, and he sort of hosted Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer, if you remember, didn't put any tweets out about this, even though he was supposed to be the man sort of hosting it. It was obviously the other way around. But when he was rather apologetic to Donald Trump, when Trump said, you know, wind power is a waste of time.
Wind needs massive subsidy. And you are paying in Scotland and in UK and all over the place where they have massive subsidies to have these ugly monsters all over the place. They also kill all your birds. You know, they wipe out. You know, it's interesting. If you shoot a bald eagle in the United States, they put you in jail for 5 years. And yet windmills knock out hundreds of them. They don't do anything. You explained that. So it's a very expensive energy. It's a very ugly energy. And we won't allow it in the United States.
So we believe in a mix, and obviously oil and gas is going to be with us for a very long time, and that'll be part of the mix, but also wind, solar.
The mix. We believe in the mix. We believe in the mix. What's he talking about? Well, according to this, we may well believe in a mix, but it's costing us an awful lot of money. The grid operator had to pay £4.9 million to buy energy from abroad and switch on expensive gas power generation to meet demand because the turbines couldn't provide enough energy for the grid. And if it was if we were relying on simply wind turbines, we would have no energy at all.
Well, I mean, this is the big problem with our net zero project, is that our national grid is made for the dark ages. There is no point building all of these wind turbines and putting all these solar panels up if the national grid cannot cope. You know that it's windy, not consistently. Sometimes it's very windy, sometimes it's not windy at all. So the only way that wind power and solar power works is that when there is a big spike in energy being generated because it's a windy day, that we can then store that for later when it's not windy. But at the moment we simply don't have the infrastructure for it, and we're having to pay companies to turn the wind turbines off. Just yesterday we paid the electricity operators 1.3 million just yesterday to turn the wind turbines off. So this is just where our net zero policy seems absolutely ludicrous, and that comes through to us in higher energy bills. Ed Miliband told us that energy bills were going to go down by 300 quid. I don't know if you saw the interview with Keir Starmer speaking to Susanna Reid. Susanna Reid's normally very woke, but she really actually did go for him on, you know, how on earth are people supposed to believe that their lives are getting better under Labour? You promised the energy bills would come down, and they're going up and up and up because they had some lady called Rhonda go on their show, a black lady supporting reform. How on earth can Keir Starmer call her racist? And she's there saying, I'm about to be evicted because my rent's gone up, my energy bills have gone up, my food bill's gone up, I'm working 2 jobs because one isn't enough. Keir Starmer, I can't sit around and wait for you to maybe one day bring the energy bills down. They go, but then Keir Starmer sat there insisting, oh no, we are bringing the energy bills down, they're going to come down, don't worry, just trust me.
It's ridiculous. Maybe we should ask Jürgen Meyer, the man that runs GB Energy, how he's going to bring the energy bills down.
Not my job.
Check it out.
It will help bring energy prices down.
When?
Well, it's a matter for government and policy to decide.
But as the boss of this, and as someone who is driving forward the ambition of the government, you surely have an idea in your head of when that central pledge to the people of reducing their bills by £300 will come into action.
It is not in the remit of Great British Energy to work out exactly how that energy costing gets through to the consumer.
Brilliant.
Well,
absolutely
why did we bother setting up Great British Energy then?
You might well ask.
What was the point?
There was no point, and there still is no point. We've got to take a break, though, because we're running terribly late. I'm getting in a lot of trouble. We'll be back after this.
An absolute disgrace.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. If you haven't seen the podcast yet, you have to get it. If you miss anything of the show, you can see all the best parts coming up around about 10:15, 10:30 when we finish every single day. It's been quite a week. We've seen, of course, the Labour government losing the plot completely by attacking Nigel Farage, attacking reform and attacking the good people of this country at their Labour Party conference up in Liverpool. Keir Starmer spent the best part of an hour having a go at Nigel Farage, saying that he doesn't actually like Britain, he doesn't think Britain is worthwhile, he doesn't actually have anything good to say about Britain, all complete and utter cobblers, of course. And this morning in the papers, very much so, it's a sort of mea culpa from Keir Starmer's aides. They're all saying, oh, do you think we might have got that wrong? Do you think this could have been the biggest blunder of all time that Keir Starmer has actually made? Because what he's done is he's set himself apart from the good people of this country who don't like immigration out of control, who don't like the way that the government is governing the country, and who, quite frankly, would like to have a general election tomorrow to get rid of them all. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Steve from Barnsley. Every day is a bad day from these muppets that are trying to run this country. I go to bed every night thinking it can't get much worse tomorrow, surely. Switch on Mike in the morning, what do we get? Shambles. This lot, they couldn't lie straight in bed.
And when you say lie, you mean exactly what I'm about to say, because it turns out that Keir Starmer yesterday, when he went and did the rounds trying to sort of justify his attack on Nigel Farage, he basically started lying about the Dublin Convention. And this was an argument that he made where he said that it's basically down to Nigel Farage that all these boats are coming across the channel. It's all Nigel Farage's fault because he made Brexit happen. And, of course, because of Brexit, we can't now deport anybody. Well, it turns out that that was also a lie, because under the Dublin Convention, we sent something like 200 people back to countries where they came from in Europe, and we then, in response, got 1,200 people coming here as a result of agreements that were made with other countries in Europe. So the whole thing is complete and utter nonsense. Starmer's attacks on Farage backfire. This is what it says on the pages 10 and 11 of the Daily Mail this morning. The party plunges in the polls. They've lost another 5 points as the Prime Minister ramps up his war of words with reform. And, of course, we learned yesterday from Zia Youssef that Nigel Farage had his personal security detail reduced by 75% thanks to the Parliamentary Standards Committee and the Home Office, who decided he didn't need protection anymore. I mean, it's absolutely and utterly ridiculous what's going on. Richard Tice is going to join us very shortly, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. We'll get his view on exactly why Keir Starmer has decided to personalise his attacks on a man who has done more for Britain than anybody else in politics that I can remember in the last 10 years. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Let's have a quick look and a reminder of what Keir Starmer said at his speech in the Labour Party conference just a couple of days ago.
We can all see these snake oil merchants on the right, on the left, but be in no doubt, conference, none of them have any interest in national renewal, because decline is good for their business. I mean, think about it. When was the last time that you heard Nigel Farage say anything positive about Britain's future? He can't. He doesn't like Britain, doesn't believe in Britain, wants you to doubt it just as much as he does.
I mean, complete and utter nonsense, right? This from Sean in Gloucester. Morning, Mike. So Keith Starling's true colours have been exposed yet again with his vile and stupid attack on Nigel Farage and his supporters. I've had enough of being called a far-right racist thug by these cretins. It seems to me that Starling has realised he has already lost. Let's get a voice note from Laura.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire. Just seen an interesting article in The Telegraph where they seem to have uncovered that the Labour Party is facing questions over paying journalists and influencers through some lobbying company to post progressive videos online, such as Nigel Farage doesn't stand for the working class and other anti-reform things. I mean, they really have hit rock bottom. Hilarious watching Keir Starmer try and wriggle away from Beth Rigby. It gets better. Let's just hope the next few years go quickly. Great show.
Absolutely right. Let's talk to Richard Tice, MP, of course, for Reform, Deputy Leader as well. Richard, very good morning to you.
Well, it's morning. Whether it's a good morning, given everything that's going on, is once again a matter of debate. But isn't it interesting? I mean, Starmer's now, frankly, panicking. He's sort of shuffled off to his favourite place, Brussels.
Yeah.
Talk with a whole load of bureaucrats about, frankly, not a lot, as he takes cover from the carnage left behind after his, frankly, outrageous speech, when he literally said, words are not enough against reform, take up arms for action. I mean, if that's not a licence to his nutters, Antifa and the far left to be violent, I don't know what is.
It is really extraordinary that he said those things as the sitting Prime Minister of this country. You know, I said this 2 days ago, Richard. I don't know if you were able to hear what I was doing then. But, you know, for a sitting Prime Minister to be so brazenly threatening and so irresponsible in the encouragement of violence against fellow, Democrats, I find quite astonishing. And I wonder why the police have not actually been knocking on his door and saying, excuse me, you seem to be inciting a bit of violence, Prime Minister.
Well, you're quite right. But of course, we know the answer to that because you've got two-tier policing and two-tier justice under two-tier Keir. And they're all in it together, the leaders of these various elements of the establishment. And, frankly, it's terrifying when you've got a Prime Minister calling for his supporters to take up arms. You've got a Deputy Prime Minister lying about Nigel and just a whole load of nonsense and then coming on and having to apologise for it. You've got multiple cabinet ministers, frankly, libelling and slandering Nigel. I mean, it's a very bad place to take a once highly respected democracy. We are heading down the plug hole under this bunch, and it's pretty terrifying, actually.
Isn't it funny, though, that they seem to be playing the Democrats' playbook from 2020 and also from 2024 and also from 2016, where the Democrats in America tried to label Donald Trump as a racist, tried to label Donald Trump as a fascist. I mean, even now they're still doing it, saying, what Donald Trump wants to be is king of America and what he wants to do is stop all elections and not have any more. And they're following that path, even having seen the fact that it backfired spectacularly in America and people who had common sense voted for what they saw was freedom and Donald Trump.
Well, that's right. And obviously, you're seeing with Starmer, he's just lashing out all over the place, utterly desperate. I thought it was interesting that Dan Hodges basically says that was his last conference speech.
Yeah.
That may well turn out to be the case. We are absolutely determined to give an electoral thrashing to Labour at the ballot box next May. And then hopefully that'll be the end of him. What replaces him, who knows? But at the end of the day, we're all getting poorer under this lot. But we are having an influence on certain other areas. There is some good news. The Labour Party now talking about making it harder for dependents to come and join people who've given asylum in this country. That's a good thing, making it, so they say. And then we've also got the Tories, who just a few years ago introduced Net Stupid Zero, now admitting it was a terrible, catastrophic error, and they're going to scrap it. So once again, Reform are leading the way on all these policies, and that's the optimism that your good listeners and viewers need to take away this morning, Mike.
Yeah, and they do take it away, and they love it, and they love the fact that there are very few places where they can hear the likes of yourself talking, without being interrupted, talking without being contradicted, talking without being questioned and kind of vilified and pilloried as if you're some kind of maniac, because the normal people of this country agree with much of what you say. And a very disturbing story this morning in the Telegraph, written by Gordon Rayner, a very important guy there at the Telegraph, associate editor, saying the Labour Party is facing questions now over alleged payments to journalists and influencers to post social media content that criticises Reform UK. If you didn't know what you know and what I know about the way the media works in this country, you'd be staggered. I'm actually not staggered this is going on. I'm sure it is going on.
Well, that's the sort of thing that you hear about going on in an authoritarian dictatorship like Russia or North Korea. So, you know, whether or not that's where Starmer is taking things, I don't know. All I can say is that, you know, when I'm in my constituency yesterday at a resident's home, and I have sort of 80, 85-year-old residents fuming about the fact that, you know, social care is costing them or their loved ones an absolute fortune, tens of thousands a year, whilst we're sort of taking hundreds and hundreds of illegal migrants across the channel, costing £40,000-50,000 a year, and that's where they see their taxes going. And it's pretty sobering stuff, I have to say, when you hear it sort of portrayed like that. That essentially the care and provision for our elderly and vulnerable in our constituencies is being prejudiced by the cost we're spending on these illegal migrants.
Right. Well, isn't it funny that, you know, until he was elected Prime Minister, Keir Starmer spent most of his life complaining that Britain was broken, basically, and he now, excuse me, and he now says that it's down to you that Britain is broken because you keep saying it. Well, this is what he used to say a little over a year ago.
I mean, look, we've got to be optimistic. They're starting to talk our language on visas, on indefinite leave to remain. So in reality, they won't actually do anything about it. But we are changing the narrative. And I think that's why actually we're going up and up in the polls, and we will continue to do so, because people won't forgive, they won't forget what the Tories and Labour have done to this country. And the quantity of people saying to me, how can we get an earlier election is truly remarkable. And how this lot survived for another 3 3/4 years. I suppose that's another hope of optimism. People say it's another 4 years. Actually, it's not. I'm counting every month down. It's 3 3/4, Mike. Yes. We need to take some hope.
Well, this is it. I worked out the other day they're actually 25% in to their period of supposed occupation of Downing Street. As you know, I've been saying for a long time, I don't think they'll make it. I don't think they'll last that long. Certainly Keir Starmer won't. What about this? Talking of net stupid zero, as you call it, front page of the Times today, Britain blows £1 billion on turning off turbines during high winds. So we spent £1 billion this year alone to not actually get any power from these wind turbines. What the hell is going on?
Oh, and by the end of the year, it'll be way more than that. And even the eco-zealot lovers and various government departments admit that the cost of these, what they call constraint payments or balancing payments to pay the operators to turn this very old technology. I mean, these wind turbines, I mean, it's 300-year-old technology, for heaven's sake. You know, it's not exactly cutting edge. And yeah, these constraint payments are going to be billions and billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash. It's an outrage. And then you've got that Red Ed Miliband, bless him, ridiculously saying that he's going to ban the extraction of shale gas. This is literally our energy treasure that we all own under our feet, that gives us competitive low energy prices, and he wants to stop it. I mean, the guy is he's an economic vandal.
Yeah.
He really is. And he's destroying hundreds of thousands of jobs up and down the country. And it's an absolute disgrace. Just in Lincolnshire alone, we've got the Lindsey oil refinery that's in receivership. And his ideology means that he's trying to prevent a sale to bidders who want to buy the whole site, thousands of jobs at risk. I mean, you know, we're battling every day against this complete madness.
Yeah, it is madness. And, you know, you'll have seen him yesterday having to go at Elon Musk. You'll have seen him doing this weird sort of catwalk video up and down on the promenade at Liverpool. You've seen him with his ukulele. You've seen him talking absolute and utter rubbish. You've seen Jürgen Meyer.
What was this clip all about? I mean, what is he doing here?
I've no idea what he's doing. He's trying to appeal to young people, right? Because he thinks that if he does this on TikTok, because they've all got these ridiculous advisors who go, this is how you get in touch with the young. You know, I don't know anybody who thinks Ed Miliband is not a complete plonker, right, who's under the age of about 20. They all think he's an idiot. And by the way, everybody over the age of 20 thinks he's an idiot as well. You know, the guy needs to sit down and shut up. But this is what tells you about the Labour government. The vast majority of people in the Labour Party think he's the next leader. They think he's the future.
Actually, to be candid, I mean, I think our poll rating would soar even more if he becomes the leader.
I know.
But here he is. For those not actually watching but listening, there's this video of Miliband sort of prancing up to a camera.
I'd say mincing more than prancing.
Mincing up to the camera, thrusting out one hip in front of the other. Some very strange look. I mean, God forbid you might actually see him in a dance floor in a nightclub. I mean, the place would evacuate immediately.
I know. It's really quite terrifying. I'm gonna give you a little gift just before you go. This is Beth Rigby, who I'm not a massive fan of, nailing Keir Starmer yesterday when he was out trying to sort of cover up the massive mistake he made by attacking Nigel Farage. And she gets him here on whether or not he thinks Donald Trump might be racist. Have a look.
Donald Trump said under Sadiq Khan, London is being driven towards Sharia law, is it?
No, of course it's not.
Okay.
That's nonsense.
Isn't it that racist as well?
Well, it's nonsense.
Isn't it racist to accuse a Muslim mayor of driving London to Sharia law?
I'm not going to start down the road of discussing whether things said by others are racist or not.
Well, you just discussed Nigel Farage having a racist policy, so you literally are discussing that.
I have been...
I mean, the guy's so stupid.
All credit to Beth.
Yeah.
She did well there, cornering him and exposing his absolute hypocrisy and frankly lies. I mean, the guy is just, he will say anything to anybody at the turn of a moment. And this is our Prime Minister. I mean, it's serious.
Well, yesterday he goes out, right, to justify what he said about Nigel Farage and about immigration. And he told more lies about the Dublin Convention, where he made out that, you know, it was Nigel Farage who made us leave the European Union, which is why we've got these boats coming. He called them the Nigel Farage boats. I mean, a complete and utter barefaced untruth that he told, where he said that when the Dublin Convention was in place, we were able to send more people back. Absolute cobblers.
And his complete cobblers, another blatant lie. I reminded myself of the data. In 2016, 17, 18, under the Dublin Convention, wow, we were able to send back to the EU a few hundred, but they sent to us sometimes double or treble that number. And
well,
we were only
sometimes 6 times. It was like 1,200 one year.
Right, in 1 year. I mean, it's just, you know, this man is he is a dangerous liar. And a threat to our democracy, the way he's behaving. He's not fit to be Prime Minister, and the sooner he's gone, the better. And then we can have a laugh at Mr. Miliband mincing his way into Downing Street.
Yeah, well, the next chapter will then begin. Listen, Richard, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, of course. Let's get a voice note about Michelle Mone from Dan.
Good morning, Mike. It's Dan from Kent. There's obviously a lot of fraud committed during COVID. Billions probably handed out on bounce-back loans, fraudulently claimed, PPE contracts. So why doesn't the government sell if they think there's any fraud committed, sell these to debt collecting agencies? A bit like you could have a car parking fine that obviously carries on. That gets sold to a debt collecting agency. They go out, they collect the money, and then obviously take a fee. Just wondering. Great show.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Just wondering is a good question indeed. So, indeed, one from Matthew says, lockdown was a great opportunity for those busy little bees to make pots of honey, while us plebs thought we were protecting our fellow patriots, but we ultimately took the suffering. Absolutely abhorrent and appalling. He's obviously talking about Michelle Mone. To put into context how much taxpayers' money Michelle Mone and her husband have scammed out of the government, it would take 21,000 workers on a salary of £35,000 a year to generate the tax receipts to pay the money Mone's company charged the government. We want to see jail time and their assets seized, says James. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if they can go that far, because limited companies are limited companies, and limited companies are, by their very nature, limited in what their liability is. And so at the moment, the PPE company, which is currently being told to pay up an extraordinary amount of money, £122 million, says they've only got 666,000. You can have that if you like. But that's really a drop in the ocean, isn't it? 0344 499 1000. Should she be stripped of her peerage? Probably. Should she have ever been given a peerage? Probably not. I think that's a better question. This is Talk.
trying to paint the next election as a straight shootout between Labour and Reform, so that if people are so put off by the horrible, monstrous racist, as he would say it, Nigel Farage, then the only thing which they can do is hold their nose and vote for Labour. The Tories not even at the races, and then other minor left-wing parties, the Greens and the Lib Dems, all coalesce around Starmer's banner in a basically big attempt to stop Nigel Farage getting into Downing Street.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:25. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. I see what the Labour government's doing today is they're sending out that complete useless, hopeless, hapless MP, Mike Tapp, to go out and do their bidding for him today, where he's talking about a row with Reform. We'll keep that going. We'll keep inventing new ways of actually criticising the Labour government, because they keep coming out with the most ridiculous nonsense, and some of the people who they put out to actually stand up for them really shouldn't have permission to go out on their own. Without a pair of mittens and some handcuffs. You know what I mean? 0344 499 1000. Simon says the same thing in Cardiff. He says, Mike Graham, Labour are obsessed with calling Nigel Farage a snake oil salesman, yet Miliband promised £300 off energy bills and we're yet to see a penny off. Surely that's the definition of a snake oil salesman. Well, exactly. Not just snake oil, but generally oil and gas. Exactly right. Great show. Kev in Shropshire says, Mike, it's simple. Net zero and growth are completely incompatible. Net zero and jobs, net zero and a strong economy, net zero and our future are a recipe for failure. U-turn now before it's too late. Well, I wish they would. Coming up to 7:27, let's go across to the United States of America and talk to Charles Feldman, US political analyst, co-host of KNX In Depth at News Radio KNX Los Angeles. Charles, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
We didn't get a chance to talk to anybody in your neck of the woods yesterday over the government shutdown, partly because we were embroiled in our own, political nightmare, but also because I said to my producer, Christian, I said, well, they're always shutting down the government in America. It doesn't seem to make much difference. What's different this time?
Well, so far, actually, not that much because it just started. But what might be a big difference is President Trump is saying, as a threat, that if this closure goes on, that he intends to not just furlough people. Traditionally, when we've had these stoppages or whatever you want to call them, at the end of it, people go back to work and they get their pay retroactive. Trump is now threatening to fire thousands, tens of thousands of federal workers, kind of along the lines of what Elon Musk did not that long ago. And he wants to target the kinds of jobs that are mostly predominant in Democratic strongholds for the Democratic Party. Yeah. That's what's different about this.
Yeah, I guess so. And I mean, the problem is that everything now goes through that particular sort of, prism, doesn't it? It's no longer just about the facts. It's all about, well, which facts do you want? Whose side are you on and all of that sort of stuff.
That's absolutely true. But, there's a sad part to this whole thing, which is that, while hundreds of thousands, literally, of federal workers will either be furloughed or will be forced to work without getting a paycheck for who knows how long, could be days, could be weeks, guess what government officials still get paid? Congress, because of the Constitution. So senators and Congress people, the ones who are not apparently capable of coming up with a suitable deal to keep the U.S. government functioning, while all those tens, hundreds of thousands of workers are likely going to suffer not having a paycheck, maybe for quite some time, the people responsible for it continue to get paid.
Right. I've got a little clip here from J.D. Vance. This is him talking about Donald Trump posting memes about Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader. Have a look at this.
Oh, I think it's funny. The president's joking, and we're having a good time. You can negotiate in good faith while also poking a little bit of fun at some of the absurdities of the Democrats' positions, and even, you know, poking some fun at the absurdity of the Democrats themselves. I mean, I'll tell Hakeem Jeffries right now, I make this solemn promise to you that if you help us reopen the government, the sombrero memes will stop. And I've talked to the President of the United States about that.
Yeah, government by embarrassment. Is that what we're doing now?
Yeah, and you know, and this has been an issue with President Trump all along. A lot of what he says, whether you agree with him politically or not, you know, a lot of it is kind of funny. And, you know, he's a fellow New Yorker. I'm from New York City, and so is President Trump. And I recognize a lot of what he says and does as kind of gritty New York humor.
Sure.
And I think a lot of the rest of the country just doesn't, they just don't get it.
Right. I think that is true. I mean, similarly with, you know, we suffer as well here in Britain because, you know, we have a famous, rather ironic and sarcastic sense of humour, which not everybody gets. And when you say things, they kind of go, what? Did you mean that? And you go, no, of course I didn't mean it. You know, I mean, when I first lived in America back in the 1980s, and I'd go outside. I mean, New York was always fine, but whenever I went anywhere sort of west of New York into the Midwest or anything like that, people would say things like, you know, is it really foggy in London? And I'd go, yeah, well, absolutely, all the time. You literally can't see the hand in front of your face. Terrible nightmare. You know, and they all were like, really?
And they bought it.
And they all believed it. They all thought I was being serious. You know, and they didn't realise that sarcasm was a thing.
But all the joking aside, though, Mike, this is a serious thing, and you're right that we've had a history lately, anyway, of threats to shut down the government, of actual shutdowns. The longest one, by the way, was in Donald Trump's first term. That was like, I think, it was 35 days.
Right.
You know, and that has an effect on the economy, and anything that eventually has an effect on the U.S. economy, as I'm sure you know, will eventually have an effect on the economy elsewhere in the world. So, you know, this is something that we can all make certain amount of jokes about it, and some of it is funny about how Congress doesn't do anything and they still get paid to do nothing. But that aside, at the end of the day, Mike, this has to be resolved, and the United States government has to be up, working, and open for business. And it being shut down effectively is something that cannot be allowed to continue.
No, of course. One funny story to finish up with, and this is about Donald Trump's visit to the UK. I don't know if you've seen this one, but apparently we organised for a whole lot of flags to be flown. Obviously, when there's a state visit, there's flags up and down the Mall, there's flags all over Windsor. Apparently, when the first lot of flags arrived, Trump's team said they're not the right colour red. They said, actually, they're not red enough. They're not MAGA red. They're too kind of like liquidy, kind of, you know, watery red. And so they had to spend 50,000 quid replacing all the flags because they weren't the right red.
Did they really? They replaced the flags with a better red to suit?
Yes, because they said that Team Trump said that these are not right for us. These are not the right colour red.
My God.
You can find the story on Mail Online. I'll get the guys to send it to you. It's quite a funny story.
Yeah, there's very little that shocks me, but that kind of shocks me. What shocks me is not so much that the White House wanted it, but that they got listened to and the flags were all changed.
Well, this is the problem with Britain in this day and age, you see. Britain in 2025. In the old days, people, if under Margaret Thatcher, she would have gone, listen, it's good enough for me, it's good enough for you, sit the hell down and we'll talk about what we're going to talk about. Whereas this Keir Starmer just goes, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm so desperate to suck up to Donald Trump. We'll get some more flags made straight away, another 50 grand, no problem.
Can you get the old flags at a discounted rate?
I don't know. I mean, maybe they can send them to Iran when they can burn them, you know, because my dad always used to say, you know, where do they get all these flags to burn? These places in the Middle East where they weren't finding these stars and stripes to burn all the time. Maybe we'll send them there, make a bit of money on the side. Charles, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Charles Feldman there, US political analyst, co-host of KNX In Depth over in Los Angeles. Let's get a voice note from Lee.
Morning, Mike. Lee from Chelmsford. Whatever the opposite is to the Midas touch, and Starmer's got it. Instead of coming out with all these gimmicks about 10 years, you've got to be here and you can't do this and you can't do that, The simplest way around all of it is to say, if you enter the country illegally, in whatever means that is, you've got no right to be here and you're going to get deported. Keep it simple. All the best, Mike.
See, when you say it out loud, it sounds easy, doesn't it? Forget about renewing Britain. Forget about telling people under what circumstances they have to come here, under how they must arrive and which boats they can use, which boats they can't use. Just say if you arrive here illegally, you can't stay. Simple as that. We're going to kick you out straight away. 7:34.
This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:37. I'm Mike Graham. This from Cole, who says this. Mike, just wanted to give my 2 cents on the whole reform policy, our racist rhetoric. Starmer and his whole cabinet have been spouting. Labour keeps saying reforms policies are racist, but then in the next breath they insist reform voters are not. Now, think about what that really means. Either people recognise those policies as racist and back them anyway, which is a very serious accusation, or they don't recognise it, which implies the establishment thinks the public are too ignorant or too broken to see what's right in front of them. You can't have it both ways. Either way, it's insulting to the people of this country. Well, if you remember back to the days of Brexit, those dark days, which kind of, in a way, gave birth to Talk Radio and gave birth to us as an independent voice in the media who actually backed the people of this country and what they wanted after they voted massively in favour of a referendum to leave the European Union in 2016. And we found the same thing. You know, you'd get these Remainers coming on television saying basically, oh, you know, everybody was misled, they didn't really understand it, all the people who voted to leave the European Union were a bit stupid, really, and some of them were actually bigoted, some of them were really racist, some of them was too ignorant to even understand what the nuances of the arguments were, and they voted to leave simply because they were lied to by Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, and they thought that they would have something better than we have now, and in fact they were completely wrong. And so all of those same arguments being trotted out. Keir Starmer's trying to do the same thing now, where he's basically trying to say, oh, well, people who want to vote reform are doing it for a whole series of reasons, but they're not racist, they're just being led around the room by people who are racist. When Shabana Mahmood said yesterday she didn't think Nigel Farage was a racist, she said she thought he was worse than that. She intimated that he was manipulating the public because the public is so stupid they don't know what they think. Well, it didn't work in 2016, it didn't work in 2019, it didn't work in 2017, and it ain't going to work now. So they might as well give it up, right? Let's talk to Jamie Jenkins, independent statistician and former head of health analysis at the ONS, because he's got some very interesting things to say about migration and about the economy as well. Jamie, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you doing?
Good to see you. Yeah, very well indeed. You know, they hate you on the Labour side because you actually provide facts and you actually provide data and you actually provide figures that they can't really argue with. So carry on. Tell us what you got for us.
Yeah, well, it looks like we were racist in the 1980s and 1990s, Mike. So we had the mid-2024 population stats last Friday from the ONS. I've been digging into what's really happened since I was born in 1979, really. Yeah. What's been going on in Britain. And what's remarkable is, and this is kind of reading into why Reform are talking about the policies they're talking about, is if we look at the last 3 years, so that's mid-2021 up to mid-2024 across the UK. Now, we had a net inflow in immigration of 2.3 million. And then if you go back to the 1980s, so 1981, let's start there. It took from 1981 to 2007, so that's 26 years, to get net immigration of 2.2 million. So we've had more in the last 3 years than we have in 26 years. And that's kind of when Nigel Farage is talking about the strain on the services of this. We can't continue. So migration was in the tens of thousands in the 80s and 90s. Tony Blair came in and it started going over the 100,000 barrier. Then it continued under David Cameron and Theresa May. And in the last 3 years, Mike, it's just been unprecedented. And that's why I suppose the Reform Party are trying to get a grip on this. So it's not racist to have had those figures in the 1980s, so it's not racist now.
Well, exactly right. And in terms of the way that the migration stats have changed, I mean, what's clear, and we all knew this and we've been saying it for years, is that the increase in acceleration of the numbers of people coming into this country over, the past 5 years has been extraordinary compared to the previous 20.
Indeed, and what's changed, because people talk about this, you just mentioned the Brexit vote there as well, and this is where it's complete government failure in terms of controlling the border. So what happened after the Brexit vote is we did start seeing immigration coming down from people within the EU, and we've seen in the last few years, though, a massive increase in the number of people coming from non-EU countries. So in the last year, the big 5 countries in terms of where people are coming from into the UK net is India, Nigeria, Pakistan, China, and Zimbabwe. And you wouldn't have had those kind of levels of immigration from those countries, you know, in the last 10, 20 years before that. And that has a big impact just on in terms of the kind of the society that we live in and integration. And with the numbers that you have in, Mike, you tend to find as well you get pockets of people setting up their own communities rather than integrating within the country.
Well, right. And when you think about some of the countries they're now coming from, you know, those countries you mentioned were sort of traditional places where people would come from. But now we're talking about places like Eritrea, Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, you know, those kind of sub-Saharan African countries where, you know, before they never came. And there's no explanation in the stats, is there, for why they're coming. But what we can say, I would say with relative surety, is they're not coming because of climate change. They're not coming because of wars. They're coming because they want to come, because they fancy a better life.
Yeah, and you can't argue with people having a better life. But ultimately, Mike, you know, we're living without our means at the moment. We're borrowing money. You know, we talked recently about we borrowed huge amounts of money in August, huge amounts of money in June. And the total asylum accommodation, which is focused on that, recently cost us 4.7 billion. And we recently spoke about the fact that, you know, to pay that bill, 600,000, you know, people working in Britain had to get up every tax, the income tax and national insurance to fund that. So I think in terms of migration, people always said, oh, it's a net benefit to the country, but that's kind of coming, the chicken's coming home to roost on that, Mike, in that the people who are coming over, and a lot of these are a drain on the state. And that's ultimately what these figures mean. And the more important thing as well, Mike, what does this mean, these levels of migration for people living here? So in 1998, the average house price was 60,000 across England and Wales. By 2004, that had gone up to 280,000. So 367,000 increase. Average wages over the period went from about 17.5 to 37.5. So they've almost doubled there, just over double there, Mike. So, but when house prices have gone up so much because of this net migration, people can't get in the housing now. Your average price to the average wage was 3.5 times back in 1998. It's now 7.5 times. So it's no wonder you know, young people in this country can't get on the housing ladder, can't start a family, and it's devastating. But
that's the thing. There's also an admission today by the government, which they previously have never admitted, that basically families are allowed to come into this country too easily and too quickly, because according to the front page of the Times today, automatic rights for refugees are going to be scrapped. Keir Starmer says he's going to end the golden ticket for asylum seekers by requiring refugees to earn their right to bring their families to Britain and scrapping automatic settlement, which tells you that up until now, people had the right to bring their families to Britain. We saw a story just the other day of the guy who's the nephew of the commander in the Taliban, who claims that he didn't want to be a jihadi, so he had to come to Britain to save himself from being put on the front line of whatever it was the Taliban wanted him to do. But he's now been told by a court in this country that he can bring 7 members of his family, including his parents, his sister, and a nephew and a niece. And none of them can speak English, and the judge even acknowledged that actually it's going to cost the country quite a lot of money to keep these people, because they won't be working. There'll be a drain on the state, there'll be a drain on the welfare system, and that's just one example of 8 people who have come to this country because they don't like the Taliban, supposedly.
Yeah, and that's why the figures, Mike, we had 624,000 net in 22, 906,000 in 2023, and nearly 740,000 in 2024. And it's partly to what you said. Somebody comes over and then they start bringing over loads more of their family. I think one of the things is started under the Conservative government. We are seeing in net migration figures starting to come down from those really high levels, because they're looking at these bogus student visas and looking at this right for family to come over. But, you know, what's the purpose of migration, Mike? Really, for the British population, the purpose of migration is for people to come over, contribute to society, pay tax. The example you give is not going to be doing that. And what does it mean? More borrowing or increased taxes. And that's not a really good overall.
No, it really isn't. Jamie, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Jamie Jenkins, independent statistician, giving us the lowdown on why immigration has become such a massive problem over the course of the best part of the last 5 years. In just 3 years, he says, net migration was more than the entire 27-year period before that, from 1981 to 2007. So more in 3 years than there were in more than 25 years. That's an extraordinary figure, isn't it? And that's what's the problem in this country, and that's why people are up in arms, and that's why people are demonstrating. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Orla Minahan. We spoke to her yesterday. She's one of the Pink Ladies. She's a reform candidate for Epping. She organised a demo yesterday outside Downing Street in Whitehall. We'll find out how that all went. First, though, here's a voice note from Carl.
Hi, Mike, Carl in Bury. Just wanted to let you know, talking about energy bills coming down, 12 months ago when Keir Starmer took over, I was paying £190 a month for my gas and electric. I'm now paying £200 and roughly £50 a month. So I'm £60 a month worse off. So I'm paying £720 a year more. My food bill has gone from about £140 a week to about £220 a week. So I'm about £1,000 worse off in that respect. So give me one reason. Or why would I vote Labour?
Carl, you make a very good point, and everybody will have a similar story. Everybody's electricity bill has gone up, everybody's gas bill has gone up, everybody's food bill has gone up, everybody's council tax bill has gone up, everybody's car insurance bill, home insurance bill, every single bill that you get now has gone up. And everybody knows why that is. It's because this Labour government has made it impossible for any company to make any money at all because of the rise in national insurance, because of the taxes they're putting on them, and because of the unsuitable and unworkable and unpredictable future that most companies say that they now are suffering from. And that is the problem. I've realised Starmer's skill, says Steve. He's great at being wise after the event, but not during. Corbyn, Mandy, Rayner, Lord Ali, racist slurs. His skill is being too late to realise things. Genius. That's not great, is it? Morning, Mike, says Sharon. Moan and her husband need to pay back all that money. She and her husband put innocent people's lives at risk because of their greed. That's Sharon in Staffordshire. And this one here from Nigel in Brighton. Morning, Mike. Whilst I would agree 100% with the stupidity of lockdowns, borrowing fortunes to pay people to stay at home and buying mountains of PPE, the one point I think you miss is the role of the mainstream media. They played it, whipping up the population into a frenzy, into believing it was all necessary. Any politician trying to argue against it, that would have been hounded out of office by the main channels. I remember the daily league tables of countries' death totals being headlined every day, and the constant narrative that we should have locked down sooner and longer. Listening to the constant gaslighting by mainstream media in 2020 was what made me find talk radio. Keep up the good work. Well, you can't underestimate how important talk radio was and how important our kind of positioning on the lockdown was, because there was literally nowhere else to go. There was nowhere else to listen to anything other than state propaganda, World Health Organization propaganda, fear-mongering about if you go out, you might cause somebody to die. If you send your kids to school, they might come home and kill their granny. I mean, it was unbelievable what was going on. And in the midst of all of that, people like Michelle Mone were making a fortune because the people running government were so stupid they didn't bother to check that what she was selling them actually worked. She managed to convince them to pay her over £100 million to supply some masks and some gowns. That's right, the things that you wear in hospital, the things that doctors wear in hospital. How did you make 122 million quid out of that? That's an awful lot of masks, isn't it? Shouldn't somebody have gone, are you sure about this? But they didn't. You know why? Because they were so mesmerised by what they were seeing and what they were thinking and what they were believing that they couldn't actually see what was going on. They couldn't see the truth. I think the people who bought all of that stuff, people like Matt Hancock, people like Boris Johnson, they should all be in the dock. They should all be the ones who are saying, this is why we did it. It may well be that Michelle Mone's right. They are being scapegoated because they weren't the only ones doing it. It's absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? Coming up, though, we're going to talk to Orla Minahan. She was at the Pink protest yesterday in Whitehall. We'll find out how it went. This is Talk.
can't attack the policies that we're coming out with because they know that these policies are popular. And in fact, they try and ape these policies, as we saw this week with Labour's sort of pale imitation of our position on indefinite leave to remain. So they can't attack the policies, so they attack the people. And by suggesting that reform, that we're racist, that we're Nazi, it's an attempt just to put us out of mainstream, respectable political debate altogether. So it's profoundly undemocratic in its purpose.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 5 minutes to 8, and we've got plenty to do. One here from Rocco, who says, Mark from Falkirk here. How long before Starmer says he actually didn't read his speech he made the other day? Well, you would expect him to say that at some point in an interview, no doubt down the road. Yesterday, though, while he was nursing his wounds from having a go at Nigel Farage, outside of Downing Street, making quite a lot of noise, was the Pink Ladies protest, and it was going on thanks to a lot of organisation from a lot of people like Orla Minahane, who's here with us now. She's Reform candidate for Epping. We spoke to Orla yesterday about what was planned. Let's see how it all went. Orla, very good morning to you.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah,
Good
very
morning.
well. I saw some footage from it yesterday. It all looked rather jolly. It looked like you didn't quite manage to find a stage, but you had all the sound systems up and running, so it was all tickety-boo. How did it go?
It was all good. I just got this T-shirt that was sent to me yesterday, which is lovely.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, it was great. I've got my voice is going, my feet are hurting, but it was absolutely wonderful, Mike. We had some amazing women, we had amazing speakers. It was the most fantastic atmosphere, and you know what, the difference between us and the counter protests, they're so angry and they're so aggressive and they were so awful to the police, where we were happy and joyful. And you know, even though we've got such a serious message that we're trying to get across, it shows that you don't have to do that in an aggressive way. You don't have to wear masks. You can come and you can be, in solidarity with people around you, and you can really enjoy it. And I mean, there were some moments that were absolutely hilarious, singing and dancing, and the others didn't know what was going on. And in the middle of it all, with all these Chinese tourists taking photos of everyone, so they must have thought, what is going on here?
Yeah, right.
We were all singing Chaz and Dave and God knows what else, but it was brilliant.
Very funny. Yeah, I mean, looking at some of the pictures we got here, these bozos holding up, women against the far right. I think Diane Abbott was there at one point.
She was.
What exactly are they demonstrating against? Demonstrating against you and a bunch of women, grandmothers, mothers, children as well, in some cases, who want to just keep their country safe from marauding, nasty, horrible criminals coming to this country illegally and doing us harm.
Correct. And look, these were, they will say on social media that there was 200 of them. There weren't. There were about 50 or 60. And do you know what? The minute 11 o'clock came, down went the signs and off they went. Because we know they're paid by the hour. Yeah. We know it's all set up. We know it's not genuine. So it's laughable. But you know what? In amongst all of this, protesting and us ladies being there, and I mean, it was fantastic because it shows that it was a safe environment for women to protest in. Yeah. And there were a lot of older ladies there who had the best time. But I've been up all night, Mike, and I have had text after text and messages on social media from women up and down the country saying, how do we do this? How do we get involved? How do we protest? And some of the stories, not just about hotels, but about HMOs, and the horror stories that these families are living with every day is shocking, and it's so unfair.
Yeah.
And I want to roll this protest out and this movement across the UK to give women the chance to all come out and all say how upset they are and angry they are, and do it in the best way, as you can see now on screen.
Absolutely right, because it's a massive problem, and you know, you know, and I know as well, because I get calls from people every day, I get letters from people every day. I got one yesterday, a card that really broke my heart, from a woman who's a pensioner living down in the southwest of England, saying, you know, she lives opposite one of these hotels, she watches the men coming in and out, she watches the food being delivered, she watches them coming out and spending money. She's like, I've lived all my life, I can't afford to eat. What is being done for me in this country? You know, and that's the tragedy.
That's the thing, and you know, you as I always say, put to the side the risk around sexual assaults and the risk to our children, and then look at the sheer unfairness of this. I had a lady there yesterday who's 92. She can't put her heating on, Mike.
Yeah.
She's there, you know, it's cold now. She can't afford to put her heating on. And she's in a mobility scooter and she hasn't been able to see her GP for 2 weeks. But yet these hotels, these men are sitting there and having GPs and dentists come into them every week. I mean, how is that fair on any level? And then the government wonder why there's uproar. And that's not racism. That's sheer unfairness.
Exactly.
And that's why everyone's uprising.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, listen, Orla, you need any help, you'd let us know, because we'll spread the word as much as we can. And if you want to get in touch with Orla, we'll put you in touch with her as well. Orla, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Great day out. I'm sure there'll be many more to come over the course of the winter months. The Pink Ladies out there in Whitehall yesterday, making a name for themselves, looking down the road as well. Diane Abbott, I mean, what an absolute shambles she is, turning up to protest against women who want to protect their own families and their own children. Absolutely outrageous. 0344 499 1000. Nigel Evans coming up after the news. This is Talk.
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash, 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 smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People smuggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that... The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... Those... The smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, where more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source. Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work.
It's crap. It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. It is, of course, Thursday, the 2nd of October, which happens to be my sister's birthday. I shall wish her a happy birthday later on, of course, and she'll be listening to this show a bit later on as well. Coming up, Nigel Evans is going to join us, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, because I'll get from him, actually, what he thinks should emanate from the office of the Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, of course, because surely it's down to him, because it was down to him the last time there was sort of what you might call fractious debate between various members of the House, various different parts of the House of Commons, various different MPs saying things about one another. He actually stood up in the House at one point and said, in the wake of the killing of David Amis, who was murdered, of course, by a terrorist with a knife who went to visit him in his constituency office in Southend, he said, surely it's now time for people to be kinder to one another. It's surely time for people to say the right thing about one another, and surely the time would be right now to tell the Prime Minister to remind him that it's not really a great look to go around telling people that Nigel Farage is the enemy, telling people that the Reform Party, which was duly elected by members of this government, members of this country, by the way, who've decided to vote in 5 different MPs. There's been all sorts of comings and goings in between, of course, but 5 MPs is what they have. They got as many votes as the Lib Dems. They weren't quite as focused on which of those votes were sort of delivered where. So the Lib Dems ended up with 72 MPs and Reform ended up with only 5. But the bottom line is that, yes, they are an elected party, democratically sought after by members of the public. Quite a large proportion of the electorate voted for them. And so I don't think the Prime Minister has any business being critical of them in the way that he has been, more or less suggesting that there must be racist in order to suspect that Nigel Farage is the man that they want in Downing Street. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. We'll be talking about Ed Miliband as well in this hour, because it turns out that we've spent £1 billion on turning off wind turbines during high winds, and when it's windy we can't get any wind from them. So we've spent £1 billion switching them off and paying basically people to not generate any electricity whatsoever. Let's get a voice note from Sean.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here, listening to Ed Miliband yesterday, banging on about bringing down energy bills for the working classes. I mean, nothing says I love the working class more than a multi-millionaire charging the poor working classes for his energy bills on his second house that he can afford himself, does he? These people are absolutely vile. Great show, Mike. Keep it up.
Sean, thank you very much indeed. We'll also talk about Michelle Mone. She's on a lot of the front pages today. She's set to lose millions after a ruling in the High Court yesterday, which says that she must cough up over the COVID masks and gowns that she provided through one of her companies. £122 million. The question is, will the government ever get the money? And should she be stripped of her peerage in the House of Lords? I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. This from Mark in Reading. He says, morning, Mike. I'm not a fan of Beth Rigby, but the way she skewered Rodney has made my day. And to be honest, I'd like to see Red Ed at the dispatch box for a little while, just for the comedy effect. What a laugh it would be. Keep the pressure on, Mike. A lot of people keep asking me to keep the pressure on, because we need to make sure that these politicians do not forget who it is that they represent. They represent us. They're paid for by us. We pay for not only their salaries, but we also pay for quite a few of their expenses as well, should we say. This one from Stephen Whitney. Mike, great show as usual. Before suggesting digital ID to deter illegal migrants coming over to work on the black market, why don't they stop housing them in hotels whilst they work delivering takeaways? They know who they are and where they are, as they shouldn't be working whilst claiming asylum. All the best, says Stephen Whitney. Yeah, I know, absolutely right. So many problems this morning to deal with, so many different issues to talk about. Let's talk to Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, of course. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Very well indeed. Good to see you. We're a couple of days out now from the Keir Starmer speech at the Labour Party conference, in which I think he took a lot of people by surprise and shocked an awful lot of people, actually, by the tone that he used, by the way that he attacked personally Nigel Farage and the way that he attacked another sort of political party. You'll know more about this than me, but if you're in the office of the Speaker of the House of Commons, as you were, is there not a duty on perhaps the shoulders of Lindsay Hoyle to have a word publicly with the next time they're all in the chamber with the Prime Minister to say, by the way, can you dial it down a bit? You know, this is not appropriate. This is not a good idea, and it could actually end up being quite dangerous.
Yeah, well, he's done it before, Mike, and I'm sure he will do it again. As you know, we've had the tragic murder of 2 members of Parliament,
Yes.
one Labour, one Conservative. We've just seen the assassination of Charlie Kirk in the United States of America. And it does seem to me that there's far greater risk these days for politicians who speak out, who literally put their necks on the block in order to promote a philosophy where clearly there's a group of people who simply don't agree with them. And it does fill me with some fear that they are now more greatly exposed than they ever have been. So I thought that the Labour Party conference was absurd in the way that they went for just simply one man. I was sent a photograph and it said this was the best-selling item at the Labour Party conference, and it was a bottle of perfume with Farage's head on it, and it was called Obsession.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that's what they were. Every major speech had a go at reform, and particularly had a go at Nigel Farage. And it seems to me as if he's clearly being effective, Mike, and that's the problem with him. In today's Daily Mail, they've got the results of an opinion poll taken since the Labour Party conference, and it says that the Labour Party have gone down 5 points. Now there is a clear 10-point lead between Reform and the Labour Party. So whatever the intention of Starmer and the Labour Party at Liverpool was, it's completely backfired.
Right. Yeah, and it certainly seems as though the sort of senior members of the Labour Party, whether they're in government or not, have begun to realise that Keir Starmer is a massive liability, and the wheels are now turning and whirring to get rid of him. Because, you know, they can clearly see. I mean, the great example of it is the digital ID story. You know, on Friday last week, when digital ID was the only thing in town, it was the only thing you wanted to talk about, because they were trying desperately to get Morgan McSweeney off the front pages and trying desperately not to talk about Donkeygate. So they sort of threw this dead cat on the table and went, right, here's what we're going to do. Digital IDs for everybody. We're going to save the planet and we're going to stop the boats coming because of it, and we're going to make sure that nobody works here illegally. All that nonsense. Didn't even get a mention in his speech, right? He completely forgot about it. But when he announced it on Friday that they were going to do it, there was a sort of 35% approval in the country of the idea, generally, of ID digitally. Now, today, it's gone down to minus 14%, which tells you that anything that Keir Starmer now sort of, you know, proselytises about and says that he wants to introduce is dead in the water.
Yeah, and in today's newspapers, anonymously, a Labour minister is quoted as saying, listen, these people, illegal asylum seekers, are already working in the black economy, so introducing an ID card scheme isn't going to make any difference whatsoever. It's going to cost billions, absolutely billions it will cost to introduce it, and for no effect at all. And another thing he did, Mike, which I noticed, was he tried to put the blame on the huge increase of illegal immigrants into the United Kingdom being part of Brexit.
Right.
And of course, it's got nothing to do with that,
No.
because there has been a massive increase in the number of illegal migrants into the EU. So, you know, they've not left the European Union. They're all still in there, but there's been a huge increase. So there's a real problem. But the other thing that's been exposed today is that this thing where Farage is blamed because of Brexit, that we can't use the Dublin Convention. And the figures show that between 2015 and 2020, we made 30,700 requests for illegal migrants to be taken back into Europe, of which 1,763 were sent back. And we accepted 3,961 in return. I mean, it says it all, doesn't it?
Well, that's right. But what I find extraordinary, Nigel, is that the alacrity with which he just tells lies. I mean, he's a lawyer, right? So you can't say he's a bit of an idiot. He doesn't really understand statistics. He doesn't really get what he's talking about. So he just sort of spouts nonsense. He must know that he's telling untruths. He must know that he is perpetuating a lie when he says that it was down to the Dublin Convention that we could get rid of more people and Nigel Farage killed that off. He must know that's not true, and yet he says it. Surely there must be a sanction for that.
Yeah, well, sadly, the sanction is the next general election, but I think that Starmer's going to actually see it, even though Burnham made a sort of a flurry at the beginning of the Labour Party conference and then pulled back when a few government ministers started to attack him, I still do not believe that Keir Starmer will see them into the next general election. They've got all those new Labour members of Parliament in seats that were never Labour before. And a lot of them, don't forget the Labour Party only got 33.7% of the vote. This thing, when he talks, I heard Starmer talk about this massive landslide they've got. Well, it's a landslide simply because of the first past the post system. They got 33.7% of the vote. If you include those who didn't vote, only 1 in 5 of the country voted for Starmer. He has got a majority, but he has no mandate whatsoever. And this ID card scheme, which I said is going to cost billions, I fought the last general election. I don't recall it ever appearing in the Labour Party manifesto or ever being talked about during the general election.
No, of course not. And it was pulled out of the hat, like literally on sort of late Thursday afternoon, clearly as a distraction to try and get everybody to talk about it when they should have been talking about other things. But he's clearly a man who is a dead man walking. You know, somebody described him to me as not only no longer the Prime Minister, he's just a bloke that happens to live in 10 Downing Street. He has no power. He's got no support from his own party. Even his own cabinet don't really want him to be leading the country anymore, leading them. You know, I don't think he's very long for this world at all. But, you know, when are we going to get some kind of respite from this man?
Well, the epitome of it all for me was when I saw him make his speech and you saw the cabinet all waving plastic
St. George Patriot Special.
Do you know, I've never seen it before. I've always seen it at Tory party conferences, but I've never ever seen it before at a Labour Party conference, and they were all commanded to do it in order to show how patriotic they were. Well, the funny thing is, Mike, you know, I've been watching conferences all my life, and the one thing that I associate with the Labour Party conference is the people's flag is deep as red. That's the flag that they were most proud of.
The hammer and sickle.
This year they have to demonstrate that somehow or other that they're very patriotic, that they love the Union Jack and the England flag, whilst you've got Labour councils pulling down those flags around the country. So it didn't ring true.
No.
And if you've got to go through that embarrassment of seeing as you can see on your screen now, Yvette Cooper and David Lammy, and by the way, David Lammy's comments were absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah.
They're actionable.
Well, he should be fired. Surely he should have been fired for saying that, shouldn't he?
Well, I believe that, number one, he has sort of apologised, but it's not a full apology. I think Keir Starmer needs to apologise for his comments, and then Keir Starmer needs to sack David Lammy. It's as simple as that. You cannot get away with casually throwing into an interview that Starmer, in his younger days, flirted with the Hitler Youth. I think it's an appalling statement.
Yeah, I know. It's absolutely ridiculous, some of the things they're saying. And talking of Nigel Farage, what can you tell us about his security detail? Because we learned yesterday from Zia Yusuf that a couple of weeks ago the parliamentary sort of security detail was pulled to the tune of 75% fewer people. Now, we're told it was a Home Office decision. I just wonder, in your previous capacity, whether you know what role, if any, the Speaker of the House of Commons has in that one.
Well, no, it's definitely a Home Office decision. Parliament gets to pick up the bill, but it's the Home Office themselves that decide what the level of security should be on any individual member of Parliament. And I know David Davis has written to the Home Secretary, David Davis MP, senior member.
He was appalled by it, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I'm appalled by it too, that I think they need to look again at the level of security that Nigel Farage is getting. I know that he pays for some of his own security himself, which is absolutely right. Listen, Mike, I know that things have changed and they continuously change. When I was first elected as a Member of Parliament in 1992, we used to have police officers sitting in committee rooms, whether it was a standing committee or a select committee. And then after about a decade or so, they disappeared and all of a sudden there was no security in the room. I understand that the Home Office regularly are looking at the security of individual members of Parliament. And I know certain, like former Prime Ministers, get security for the rest of their lives, and it can sometimes go up or sometimes down. But clearly, with the remarks that have been made at Liverpool over the last few days, and considering what's gone on in our country in the past and what's clearly happened with Charlie Kirk, and Nigel Farage himself has said that he is clearly worried now about his own security. I think that we need to that the Home Office needs to on their. It's a continuous review that they do, that they now need to look again at the level of security that Nigel Farage has.
Yeah, I think so. Final question, Nigel, just on Baroness Moan, or Baroness Bra, she's sometimes known. Front pages today saying she's got to cough up 122 million quid. She says she's been made a bit of a scapegoat. Do you think that's fair? Do you think she should lose her peerage? What do you reckon?
Well, I think that it needs to be looked at. She's been told now to pay back that sum of money. If I get it right, Mike, did she not say that none of her family were going to benefit from any of this?
She did.
I got that sense that that's what she said. And then on closer inspection, it found out that, that they clearly are going to benefit. The family will benefit from that particular contract. It does seem to me that she's been told to pay it back. She needs to pay it back. And also, even if this committee in the House of Lords looking at the standards of their members don't decide that the peerage should be removed, has she really got the brass neck to turn up? I mean, really? But it definitely, whoever it is that looks at it within the House of Lords, they need to review all the circumstances of this particular case, what she has said in the past, and the House of Lords then will make their own decision in the way that they've done. They've booted out people before, Mike, and they can do it again. Yeah, I think perhaps on this occasion they should do it here. Nigel, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, of course, former Tory MP. Let's get a voice note from Matt on Michelle.
Morning, Mike. Matt in Hove here. I think this PPE scandal just highlights the calibre of people we've got in government and running this country. So we've got Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson. In their infinite business wisdom, thought it would be a good idea to get a company who have never made a single gown before to make 122 million quid's worth of them and pay them up front and not even test any of them. I mean, the irony is not lost on me that Michelle Moan is involved in this and she makes bras, and we've got Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock who are a right couple of
Yes, I can see where you were going there, luckily before you got there, so we were able to bleep it out. This time of the morning, terribly sorry about that, 8:20. This from Lynn in Middlesbrough. For your information, I love my morning glory. My husband is called Kieran, and up to July last year, I always called him Kier. To save my marriage, I simply had to stop, so I started using Ron to avoid thinking he was utterly useless. I now love my Ron again. Keep up the great work. Well, as long as it's not Rodney, because that's the other name you can't call him. This one from Dan in Kent. Things will be so bad by the next election, even the left wing will be voting against socialism. We just need to hope there's a country left to save, Mike, after this total shower have finished with it. I know. Absolute nightmare. Coming up in this hour, we're going to speak to Lord Daniel Hannan, Conservative peer, former advisor to the UK Board of Trade. He's written a piece about immigration in this country and why he doesn't believe Keir Starmer is up to fixing it. Next, though, we're going to talk about wind power and why we've been paying £1 billion just to not have any. Thanks. Hello, Jezza.
You all right?
I'm good.
Yeah,
What are you doing? I've had my drink.
Well, I've been running around.
I'm ready now.
I'm sure you are.
Should we start the show?
No, we can't. Saturday the 15th of November, here's a promise. You will not have seen anything like it. You will get honesty, you will get authenticity, and if we get our way, you might even get a cram in at the top. 3-tier, World of Common Sense with Mike Graham.
And Jeremy Kyle.
In that order.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer here at that point. We're going to speak to Lord Daniel Hannan coming up. He's written a big piece in The Sun today, why this human rights lawyer will never do what needs to be done to control immigration. You know who he's talking about, the Prime Minister, of course. Phil in Manchester says, Mike, great show. Moan, moan, moan. In a rich man's world, PPE, personal protection, escape going into liquidation. The bursting shirt on her husband is because he left his money belt on. Yeah, possibly so. Steve in Sussex says, Mike, I'm getting fed up with hearing how every blunder by this government is the last straw. Starling must go, etc., etc. Presumably means Starmer. Yeah, every scandal comes and goes and he's still there. McSwindle's still there. Lammy's still there. It's just daily sound bites and nothing changes. Boris had some cake and he's gone. It's getting tedious. Yeah, I know what you mean, and I know you can feel like you're a little bit disenchanted and a little bit disaffected by it all, but trust me, it will happen, and it will come true. My prediction, I predict, will be true. Mark my words on that one. You can take that one to the bank. Let's talk to Harry Wilkinson, though, Head of Policy at the Global Warming Policy Foundation, because eagle-eyed viewers will have seen that earlier on in the show we revealed that this particular fact. Britain has spent £1 billion this year to switch off wind turbines because of flaws in the UK's drive for net zero. In any other world, you think that would be enough to dislodge the Energy Secretary, the man who's responsible for net zero. That would be Ed Miliband. Let's talk to Harry Wilkinson and find out why Miliband is still in a bleeding job. Harry, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I mean, when they say flaws in the UK's drive for net zero, that seems to me like the understatement of the year. What do they actually mean by that in the Times?
It absolutely is. I mean, you look at how much we're paying for wind. We're now paying £1 billion a year just to switch off wind farms when they're generating too much power.
Yeah.
The contracts with wind have been written so badly that whether we need that power or not, we pay the wind turbines for it. So we've been racking up this big, big bill to pay these wind turbines to switch off when they're not needed. And we had the grotesque spectacle yesterday of the Labour delegates in the hall applauding and cheering and whooping at Ed Miliband's speech when he was saying we'd ban fracking forever. Yeah. Now let's think about what that means. That means hardworking people in places around Blackpool, Lancashire, Yorkshire, former Labour heartlands, where they're crying out for high-skilled, high-paid, decent jobs. They're cheering the fact that these people will be denied livelihoods, denied a future. That's what this means at the end of the day. Real people, real families, denied a future under this government. It's utterly disgraceful. And of course, he's being put under more pressure than ever before. We're going to hear today from the leader of the opposition pledging to scrap the Climate Change Act altogether. And this could not be more timely. The Climate Change Act is a straitjacket. This doesn't mean that we don't care about climate change anymore, but what it does mean is that we need to address it while thinking about other things like energy security, like the cost of energy. The cost of energy is so high in the UK and that's doing so much economic damage. So, that would be a better approach. Unfortunately, it's Ed Miliband who's still Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero at the moment. So that change isn't going to be happening anytime soon. But it's a very important change that needs to happen to get Britain back on the right track, to get focusing on getting the cost of energy down, which surely must be at the heart of improving our economic fortunes.
Well, it must be, but of course we keep hearing that it is going to go down, but we keep being told by Keir Starmer and by Ed Miliband. In fact, I think Starmer has got. I think we've got a clip of Starmer, have we not, on the fact that he says that energy bills are going to come down. I think we did it yesterday. We might not have it today. But he still, he won't give a guarantee on it. He won't give an amount on it. He just says, in the long term, the bills will come down. But they can't keep just saying that and get away with it, can they?
Well, they did used to say that we'd have £300 off our bills if we voted Labour at the last election. We're still waiting to see that. And, they can't pledge this because the more renewables they add to the grid, the more balancing costs. We need to back up that power. We need to build more infrastructure to connect that power. We need to pay to switch the wind off. With all these additional costs that come with renewables, there's just absolutely no way that can possibly reduce people's bills. And you look at people's bills, the breakdown of what they're paying, policy costs, subsidy costs, network costs, those are the things that have been rising out of people's bills. We hear so many times this is about the international gas prices, but when you look at people's bills, you look at the breakdown, you see those components that are rising and rising are the policy costs, are the network costs.
Yeah, absolutely right. Harry, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Harry Wilkinson there talking about why it still is apparently a mystery as to where the savings are that the promised government said we were going to get by the time we got to last winter, actually. We're now into the second winter as we're about to get into it because we're now into almost the November period. We've just entered October. They've been in for over a year. They came in July of the year before, 2024, and they told us that by Christmas we'd have saved 300 quid on our energy bills. We're still waiting. Good morning, Mike, says Peter. We know that Boris had a problem with the truth, but Starmer takes it to a new level. He knows that no matter how many reform-like policies he and his awful government come out with, none of them will happen because he really doesn't believe in them. And that's what we're going to talk to Lord Daniel Hannan about, who says basically that he'll never control immigration because he will never do what actually needs to be done. And Dave says, so the Labour Party's answer to reform's so-called racist policies is to introduce so-called racist policies themselves. It's very confusing, isn't it? Lord Daniel Hannan coming next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It is, of course, 8:34. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. And, of course, it is Thursday, the 2nd of October. It is a massive, massive day because not only have we discovered this morning that Keir Starmer is not even the man he said he was 2 days ago, but that as he even tries to sort of get a grip on what he calls asylum seekers, and on the front page of the Times today, automatic rights for refugees to be scrapped. The Prime Minister says asylum seekers will have to earn settled status, basically admitting that the problem at the moment is that if you come here, you will be able to bring your family with you. 56,793 is the migrant tracker for the number of people coming into this country illegally by boat since Keir Starmer was Prime Minister, and it's more than 33,000 that have come here, I think, in this year alone, just since the beginning of 2025, 32,551. There we are. Piece in the Sun today by Daniel Hannan, Lord Hannan. We need to quit the ECHR, scrap the Human Rights Act, reprogram the state machine and overhaul our judiciary. The question is, will Keir Starmer do any of that? Lord Daniel Hannan, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well indeed. Great piece in the Sun today. I think you're absolutely spot on. The problem with Keir Starmer is that he doesn't actually know what he thinks. He doesn't know what he believes. He swings with whichever the wind direction seems to be blowing in. I mean, he's suddenly gone from being a human rights lawyer to somebody who wants to prevent people from being with their families. How does that work?
Yes. I mean, I think the one thing he has always believed in is the supremacy of human rights law. It's the only thread that runs all the way through his career. When he was a Trotskyist student editor, when he was the Corbyn enabler, then he was a sort of centrist dad, leader of the opposition. Now as Prime Minister, he said to Tom Baldwin when he was doing his biography, there is no version of my life that doesn't involve being a human rights lawyer. Yeah. And that's why I find it just incredible how bad he is at politics in a way, because he's never going to pull out of the ECHR. He's never going to derogate from the other treaties that prevent us deporting people. And he's certainly not going to go after the fundamental problem, which is having these lefty judges, because they were all his mates. You know, they all came up with him, Matrix Chambers and Doughty Street and so on. So why keep banging on about the issue and inflaming it and then not doing anything? That is the worst possible combination. Yeah. Extremely bad politician.
Well, it's all about posturing, it seems, with him, isn't it? I mean, when he made that speech the other day about Nigel Farage, you could see that he was sort of ratcheting himself up. He'd obviously been told to look as angry as he could possibly be. You know, nobody believes it. It's all fake. It all looks sort of performative. It doesn't look as if he means it. You know, there are some politicians who you can see actually believe in what they're doing, and you're one of them. You've always had the same views on the European Union. You've always been consistent about, you know, trade. You've always had views on immigration. You know, it's a very clear pattern that we can look at and go, well, whether you like what Daniel Hannan says or not, you know, he's always consistent. Starmer doesn't seem to have any one consistent bone in his body.
Well, as I say, except this belief in the supremacy of international law over national law. I mean, you're right, he's wobbled around on everything else. But I mean, the weird thing is, he still believes in it, just as the rest of the world is giving up on it. You know, so the thing that is driving our hugely expensive net zero program, the decision to give the British Indian Ocean Territory to a country that had never owned it, never exercised sovereignty there, all of this is driven by his and Lord Hermer's and their other human rights law friends' obsession with finding, you know, the last international court somewhere to surrender to. That is incredibly out of kilter with the times, and I'm afraid I don't see that changing. That's the one thing which I don't see changing as long as he's in number 10.
No. I mean, according to what they want to do today, and it's all very rushed, isn't it, obviously, because they're now sort of running, literally scared of whatever reform wants to come out with next. He's going to go to a summit of European leaders in Copenhagen. He says he's going to overhaul the asylum rules. One of the things they're planning to do, right, get this is laughable, they're going to go to the Balkan states where they think there's, you know, upstream something they can do to stop people coming, and they're going to try and persuade people not to leave where they live. And you're kind of going, sorry, persuade them how exactly? How are you going to persuade them?
Well, I mean, there is a way to persuade them, of course. There is a way to persuade them, and that is to ensure that you are not allowed to stay here. I mean, the reason that all these people are trying to get out of France, right, the reason that they are massed in Calais is not because France is an unsafe country, and nor is it because we're especially generous with benefits, right? They're not taking that risk to live on 49 quid a week. They come here because they know that once they set foot on British soil, they will not be deported, that our entire judicial system is geared up to overturn deportation orders. And that, I've got to say, that is a domestic problem, right? Plenty of other countries in the ECHR manage to deport people, including Denmark, since you're talking about Copenhagen, right? A cuddly lefty liberal place run by Stephen Kinnock's wife until recently. They are able to deport people because they don't have this fundamental problem that we have of judges who legislate from the bench, of people who went into the law as a substitute for politics and who now rule on the basis of what they think the law ought to say rather than what it really says. And that is really, really deep problem that some future government is going to have to deal with. And I would just caution people listening, you know, a lot of people have got the idea that leaving the ECHR is a silver bullet. It's not. It may be a necessary first step, but it won't solve the problem until we tackle the fundamental problem of a politicised judiciary at home.
Yes, and you're right to say that people don't come here just for the 49 quid a week. However, when you do go on the government website, if you're, say, sitting in a refugee camp in Calais and you see this is what it actually says. What you will get if you come here as an asylum seeker, you will be given somewhere to live and a cash allowance. You could get both as an asylum seeker. You'll be given somewhere to live if you need it. This could be in a flat, a house, a hostel or a bed and breakfast. You cannot choose where you live. It's unlikely you'll get to live in London or South East England. And on cash support, you'll usually get £49.18 for each person in your household. This will help you pay for things you need like food, clothing and toiletries, and your allowance will be loaded onto a debit card each week. You'll be able to use the card to get cash from a cash machine. So if you come with a family of 4, for example, you're getting 200 quid a week plus housing. You know, that's not a bad deal.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you could get a similar deal in the Netherlands or Germany or several of the places that you have passed through on the way here. The difference is that if you're not allowed to be there, they eventually boot you out. Maybe not Germany, but the others do. And we are really unique in failing to enforce deportation orders. And the one thing that I think might have worked was just taking the whole process out of the hands of our judiciary completely by moving illegal entrants automatically to a safe third country. And then it doesn't matter what their claim is because they're in a safe third country. They're not making their claim here. And of course, that was on the statute books in the form of the Rwanda scheme when Keir Starmer took over and cancelled it in a virtue signalling strop. And do you know what those facilities in Rwanda, which were paid for by the British taxpayer, do you know what they're doing now? They are receiving illegal immigrants from the United States. So that was there as a deterrent, was already starting to reduce numbers just because of the knowledge of it being there, and Labour then cancelled it. And I think that reveals, if you like, where their heart really is, whatever Starmer says now.
Oh, I think that's right, and I think you can see that when you look at the makeup of the Labour Party conference, when you look at the things that they come out with about immigration and about racism and all the rest of it. They are indelibly linked to the world of globalization and the way that anybody can come here. We should be a sanctuary country for anybody who wants to come and live here. Diversity is our strength, all of that. He doesn't even now admit that the Union flag is actually something which is British. He now says that anybody can be British, and that's why the Union flag stands for diversity. I mean, it's complete and utter madness.
Well, I was quite entertained by the way in which the delegates at the conference were handed these various English, Scottish, British flags, and in a slightly awkward, stilted way, kind of went through the motions, and then belted out the red flag, with unfeigned enthusiasm. You could see which one they actually felt good about. But I mean, I do think it is possible to have a sense of civic patriotism, right? We all know you will have had people on the programme who, were not, if you like, ethnically British, but who are deeply patriotic, who are committed to this country. But that doesn't just happen on its own. You've got to be prepared to elevate your values and to say, not all cultures are equal. You've come here, if you've come here legally from somewhere else, you presumably did so because you wanted to be here. Here are the things that make this country a great place. And I can't help noticing that very often the biggest problems we have with integration are not with people who came here after the war or whatever. They were very keen to be here. It's with their kids and grandchildren who have been fed this diet of kind of anti-colonialism in our state schools.
Yeah.
And have been encouraged, if they got any British history at all, it will have been presented to them as a hateful chronicle of racism and exploitation. And that's a really, really bad way of integrating a country, because we're sending out our own British educated kids born in this country with a sense of grievance against the land that gave them their nurture.
Right, absolutely right. It's ridiculous, but I have to say, agree with your piece anyway. I don't think we're ever going to see a change in immigration policy. And in the end, what does that mean for Britain? Because it means if we can't get control of this situation, we can't get a grip of it, and we're going to get, like we had the other day, another 400 people arriving, another 500 people arriving here and there, a couple of thousand people arriving the next week. Where does it all end?
Right, and arriving here, I mean, what is more likely to teach you contempt for a country than breaking into it illegally, right? And I think this is a real insult to the people who did come here properly, who queued up, did the right thing, applied because they wanted to be here. You don't uproot yourself from friends and family to come to a place that you don't want to, right? And all of those people who have done the right thing have become, loyal British subjects. I think they are now doubly insulted by seeing people coming here in this kind of sneering way of kind of, we're coming here because you're a bunch of mugs who let us in, unlike all these other countries. And there's a number of things we need to do. If we want to solve this, yes, we have to leave the ECHR. We have to leave an awful lot of other international conventions that are cited by our courts as an excuse for overturning deportation orders, including maybe the UN Convention on Refugees, possibly even the Convention on Rights of the Child. We've then got to disapply and repeal a load of Blair-era domestic laws. We need to look at some of the case laws, and we need, and this is the hardest bit, we need to look at mechanisms to remove activist judges who have plainly disregarded the law and started to legislate from the bench. And doing all of that is an incredibly onerous and difficult project. It will consume the energies of a new government. Now, I'm glad to say the Tory party conference is coming up next week. A very clever man called Lord Wolfson has been given this commission to look at all of that. He's been asked, go through, he's a very distinguished jurist, go through every law that is being used to prevent us controlling our borders and come up with recommendations. And I think it's really important to understand this is going to be a long, grueling campaign to restore control, because we've got a British state machine that fundamentally believes in what you were saying, in the open borders ideology. It was very, very telling to me that when we did move the Rwanda scheme, it was challenged in court by the trade union representing Home Office officials. And again, I think that tells you kind of everything you need to know about what is the attitude of the people who are supposedly enforcing this policy on the coalface.
Yeah, absolutely right. Lord Daniel Hannan, great piece. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. In The Sun today, page 10, why this human rights lawyer will never do what needs to be done to control immigration. Perhaps Lord Wilson, as Lord Daniel there said, can help us out and come up with a reason why the framework's wrong and fix it. That's what we need, isn't it? 0344 499 1000. Beth Rigby skewered Starmer. We'll play that clip again in the next hour. But how about this from Mark?
Yeah, good morning. It's Mark in Lancashire. Just watching that interview there of Starmer with Beth Rigby, to be honest, it's the first time I've seen it because I don't watch Sky News at all. But for me, the most worrying part of that is not the hypocrisy of refusing to call Trump a racist after calling Farage a racist, but basically that he totally failed to see that trap coming a mile off. As soon as she said, do you think Donald Trump's racist for accusing Sadiq Khan of having Sharia law policies in London? As soon as she said that, I knew straight away, oh, this is a trap because of what he said about Farage. The fact that he didn't see that, and he's supposed to be a, high-class silk lawyer and the Prime Minister of our country, means he's totally politically inept and probably a bit thick. Far too thick to be Prime Minister. The man's a total idiot.
I think I can't argue with it, Mark. He is a total idiot. You're right. He didn't see it coming. He couldn't see that that was the road she was going to go down. And she loves him, right? She's put out another tweet, apart from this one, in which she says that she thinks his speech was one of the greatest speeches she's ever seen him give and how brilliant it was, right? So she's a friend. She's not anything other than an ally. And even she has stitched him up on this business of Trump and racism, because he can't see the wood for the trees. What a plonker. Rodney, 8:48.
We're still getting the same number of migrants, at least in the short term, until it works. But fundamentally, it won't work unless they do it at such a scale that everybody knows they're being detained and deported. I mean, I just think the clearest and simplest thing to do is to ensure that everybody is removed, either back to their own country or back to France. By all means, let's have a deal with them, or to a safe third country, which is what Rwanda was for. And I'm not saying the Rwanda policy was perfect. I resigned from, I broke the whip because I didn't think it was strong enough.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 8:52, almost the last hour of the show, incredibly. I don't know where the time goes. Morning Glory podcast out, of course, around about 10:15, 10:30. Ash Regan coming up, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern with the Alba Party. Big elections coming up over in Scotland and Wales coming up in May, of course. We'll talk to her about that. Dan King, first of all, though, joins us because it's time for 90 minutes in 90 seconds.
90 minutes in 90 seconds. From the Sun.
Couple of Champions League games to talk about. Dan, very good morning to you. Manchester City and Arsenal in action last night.
Yes, good morning. And I think probably we'd start with Manchester City because their sort of up and down start to the season continues. I mean, if you've got Erling Haaland in your fantasy team, then you're very happy because he's just scoring for fun. He's now got 52 goals in 50 Champions League games, which is just crazy. But once again, they've given up a late goal, which has cost them a victory with the with a penalty. And I think it's probably a consequence, or it looks partly a consequence of the fact that Pep Guardiola is still managing the minutes of his main midfield man. Rodri took him off around the hour mark, brought someone else on, Nico Gonzalez, and it was that player who gave away the penalty late in the game.
Yeah, unfortunate for them. So 2-2 draw with Monaco. Arsenal, similar result for Olympiacos at home.
Yeah, I mean, Arsenal, although they're a little bit behind Liverpool, and they closed the gap a bit last week because of Liverpool's defeat. The more I see of Arsenal, the more I'm thinking this is a team that's going to win the league this year. I think defensively they are so strong, and although they're not necessarily flowing in attack all the time, they are getting the job done. And I think this is a fairly routine win. In a game they would expect to win, but the way that the depth of their squad and the way that Arteta is managing it is excellent. And there are also very encouraging signs that Martin Odegaard, having had an up and down season last year and also some problems with injury, is right back to top form.
Yeah, and one big story on the back of the Sun today: England fans may have to stay up really, really late and all night possibly to watch the World Cup, the one that's coming up next in Mexico, the US, and Canada. Lots of games after midnight. It's bad news for the hospitality business, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's bad news for lots of people in this side of the world. I think this is just an inevitable consequence of when you're selecting World Cup venues where the temperature and the weather is going to be so extreme in the summer. And I wouldn't be surprised that if not the next World Cup after this one, then the one after that we start seeing regular winter World Cups. Because if you think that this is in Canada, Mexico, and America, where the temperatures are going to be absolutely crazy in June and July. The next one is going to be mainly in Spain and Morocco. It's not going to be a lot cooler then. And then the one after that is going to be Saudi Arabia. So I think what we're going to see, if we want to avoid these kind of schedule changes to avoid roasting the players in the heat, then I think we're going to see a switch to a big winter window for international games where you'll play the World Cup then, so that wherever you play it, the temperatures will be suitable for playing football, and therefore you wouldn't have to muck around with the kickoff times as they seem to be proposing. Yeah, absolutely right. We'll look forward to that. Dan, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Dan King, Chelsea FC correspondent for The Sun. That was 90 minutes in 90 seconds.
90 minutes in 90 seconds from The Sun.
Loads of great messages coming in. We'll get to all of them as soon as we can, but we've got to rush on because we're running out of time. Ash Regan is here, MSP for Eastern Edinburgh in the Alapa party. Ash, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, we've got Michelle Mone all over the front pages here this morning, so before we move on to some of the things you're doing up there, can we get your view on Michelle Mone? She seems to be feeling very sorry for herself. She gave that interview a couple of years ago saying she hadn't done anything wrong, she did it to protect her family. She now looks as if she's going to be owing 122 million quid to the government.
Yes, and obviously that process has been carried out. They've found that the company that was involved, that she was linked to, needs to pay back that money. Yeah. Which is what the public would expect, and I can understand why the public would be completely outraged by this. I am absolutely sick of all this corruption and this cronyism that's going on at the top of the UK. Somebody really needs to get to grips with it. I'm not entirely sure Starmer would be the man to do that, but somebody needs to do it. My concern with this is I'd be very surprised if she is not financially, her exposure to this is not financially limited through distance. Right. So there'll be financial, maybe trusts and things like that involved. So if she personally pays back any of the money, I'll be very surprised.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the company itself in question has apparently gone into liquidation. They've only got £660,000 worth of assets. So they've got nothing like 122 million. And it's a limited company. So I'm not sure how closely connected she is and how people can get to her.
Yeah, but that's by design. That's the way they set these things up, to minimise the liability to those involved. So perhaps we need to be looking at that. I don't know, but the public would rightly expect that this money should be paid back, not that the company will go out of business, nothing will happen, we'll move on. It's totally unacceptable.
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk about your unbuyable bill. This is the support that you're giving to criminalising sex buyers as opposed to the sex sellers.
Yes, that's right. So the bill's called Unbuyable. It's seeking to change the law on prostitution. It's at stage 1 in the Scottish Parliament, so it's making its way through at the moment. And it's the first time that a bill on this topic has got this far. So that's encouraging. But I've had some good polling out just this week that shows that the public are fully supportive of the bill. So 2 in 3 Scots support the main part of the bill, which is to create a new offence to criminalise the buyers. So that's an overwhelming majority. So that shows the public are firmly behind me as I try to do this. And also decriminalising sellers. So there's even higher level of support for that. 9 in 10 Scots support decriminalising the sellers, which about 96% of them are women, recognising, I think, that they understand that these sellers are often victims of exploitation.
Right. Let's talk about what's going on with the Scottish Government and its recognition or not of the Supreme Court ruling on trans women, because that still seems to be a problem up there.
It is. So despite the fact that we are months and months on now from the Supreme Court setting out in complete clarity for anybody with half a brain what you would need to do in order to make sure that all your institutions and organisations and services, sports, even across Scotland, were compliant with the law, the Scottish Government took an unusual approach where they pretended it hadn't been happening, tried to look like they were doing something while actually doing nothing. So 4 Women Scotland are at it again, and they've managed to force the government into changing their... So the first thing that we've had this week is that the government have had to make a screeching U-turn on their schools policy. So they've withdrawn the part of the guidance which suggests that people can use any toilet they want, because obviously this was causing havoc in Scottish schools with girls mainly feeling they couldn't use the toilets, and they were obviously going off-site to supermarkets to use the loo, etc., which is unacceptable. So 4 Women Scotland, by threatening to take the government to court again, have kind of forced the government into that position where they had to say, OK, we'll change the law now. But it's long, long overdue. We shouldn't be in this position at the moment.
No, exactly right. Good to see you. Ash, sorry it's so short. We'll try and get you on for longer next time. MSP for Edinburgh Eastern at the Alipur Party. Ash Regan there talking about what's going on north of the border, of course, where they've got a massive, massive thing coming up in the new year, where they've got big elections in May. This one from a retired power generation consultant in Henley called Michael. He says, morning, Mike. Regarding wind power, the lifespan of a wind farm is short. The vast majority of the North Sea wind farms are foreign-owned, and yet we, the taxpayer, are subsidising them. As they reach their end of life, I wonder if these foreign companies will ever bear the massive cost of decommissioning the wind farms and removing them, or will they just be left to rust away for decades to come? Well, it would be a fitting sort of tribute, would it not, to Ed Miliband to have a load of rusting wind farms in the middle of the sea, a load of sort of, propeller-like things just sitting there, not being used, rusting away and looking hideous. Just a bit like Ed Miliband, really, rusting away and looking hideous. That's kind of what he's doing. This is Morning Glory. Isabel Oakeshott in the next hour, and Claire Coutinho. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to very nearly 4 minutes past 9. It is, of course, the 2nd of October. It's Thursday, and we're very nearly the end of the week. We've had Labour Party conference, Conservative Party conference coming up at the weekend. Kemi Badenoch on the front page of the Telegraph today talking about dumping net zero. I'll rip up the laws on net zero, she says. Conservatives will end targets for electric car usage and the scrapping of gas boilers. And you kind of go, really? Are you still even a thing? Is anybody talking about the Conservative Party? I mean, even Keir Starmer this week has pretty much acknowledged that the leader of the opposition is now Nigel Farage. And he spent a lot of time having a go at him. He spent loads of time demonising him. Every single member of his cabinet, 11 different people came out and said that they thought either Nigel Farage was racist or possibly worse, as in the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood's view. And they basically put a target on his back for all the nutters that follow the left. And the extreme left in particular, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder, a pretty disgraceful thing to do. We've got lots to talk about this morning, and we're going to talk to Claire Coutinho coming up, who is, of course, the Shadow Energy Secretary, because it turns out on the front page of the Times today, we've been paying £1 billion just to know that we don't actually want to use wind farms, giving them, because of flaws in the UK's drive for net zero, energy bill payers have spent a record £1 billion in compensation for lost revenue. So basically, we tell people to switch off the turbines to avoid overloading the grid when it's a bit too windy, and then we pay them for doing nothing. It's a bit like somebody paying me not to do a radio show. So I'd come in every day and they'd go, right, sit over there, we'll pay the same money, possibly more money, to not do a radio show. I know some of you would quite like that, but, you know, to be serious, obviously most of you wouldn't. But the thing is, why pay people not to do any work? There's some kind of madness going on here. I mean, only this government could come up with a plan that's stupid. And meanwhile, Ed Miliband is still here having a go at all manner of things. Michelle Moan's on the front pages this morning as well. She's been ordered to repay £122 million to the Exchequer that she received for a few masks and some gowns. I mean, this is how out of control the government was back in the days of COVID. Let's have a listen to Dave on Michelle Moan.
The Selecting World Cup.
Morning, Mike, Dave in Leyland. Yeah, Talk Radio literally saved my sanity back during the COVID years. I couldn't believe I first heard you guys on air talking about the things that I was feeling and thinking. I thought I was going insane because I was one of the few people that was kind of resisting it. And you did feel like an absolute outsider to the rest of society, and your common sense is telling you different. So I've never switched any other radio station on since then. Honestly, that's all I listen to. Don't listen to anything mainstream anymore. Keep up the good work.
Dave, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, they were dark times, weren't they? Myself and Julie Hartley-Brewer here at Talk were absolutely leading the way when nobody else was doing it and saying, hang on a minute, what's all this about masks? And what's all this about, vaccines? What's all this about, taking tests and making sure you have to isolate and all that nonsense? What a load of old cobblers. This is Morning Glory. Let us get it on. Cough up COVID, £122 million is what it says on the front page of The Sun. This from Hayley in Surrey says, about loving your work, it's a joke, Starmer being all for human rights. What about our human rights? We have the right to live in our country without facing danger, without having to pay for the illegals who get so much more than us, and we are paying for it. Will he ever wake up? It's hideous the way he continues to do what he wants and thinks about us. It's, of course, referring to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who has put his first lie of the day out, by the way. I like to track this. This is on his Twitter account, published at 8 o'clock this morning. There will be no golden ticket to settling in the UK. Settlement is earned by contributing to our society, not by paying a people smuggler to cross the channel. I am determined to make our asylum system fairer and smash the business model of criminal people smugglers. So you're going to smash the criminal people smugglers now, smash the business model of those people, not the gangs. He was going to smash the gangs before, now apparently he's given up. He's doing something else. Let's speak to Claire Coutinho, Shadow Energy Secretary. Claire, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
We see this morning that your leader, Kemi Badenoch, says that she's going to rip up laws on net zero. We also see that apparently we've paid £1 billion so far this year to people for turning off their wind turbines during high winds. I mean, surely to God, everybody can now see that net zero is a complete and utter waste of time.
Well, look, here's the problem. One of the biggest the problems that the country faces, excuse me, is poor growth. So the country is facing this challenge with poor growth. People are still struggling with cost of living. And the problem with net zero is it's making our electricity more expensive and it's sending our businesses abroad. And actually, in terms of global emissions, if you're moving a business from here in the UK to somewhere like China, which is still 60% powered by coal, then you're actually not doing anything in terms of global emissions. You're making it worse. So we've got to end that madness. We've got to make sure that we can prioritise making electricity cheaper. We've said that unashamedly, the priority for our energy policy will be bringing down costs for families, and that will be better for businesses, and it will be better for households across the country.
Wouldn't it be better just to do away with these net zero targets altogether and actually realise that whatever it is that you've done in the past, it was wrong. Whatever it was that the government did when the Tories were in power was wrong, and that it cost us an awful lot of money, and it's not actually improving the planet anyway.
Well, that's why she said she's going to repeal the Climate Change Act, because we need to think about this completely differently. When it comes to our energy policy, the most important thing that the government needs to do is to provide cheap, reliable energy. That is the engine of growth. That is what households need, and that will be our absolute priority. And that's why we've got to repeal the Act, which includes all the sort of net zero legislation you meant. So I think that is really important, and I also think it's important that we can have an electricity price which is much lower. We know we've got one of the highest prices in the world, and frankly, when you talk about going further and faster than everyone else, if what other countries can see is that you're making your country poor and that people are suffering and businesses are leaving, nobody else is going to follow that lead. The only thing that is going to persuade the rest of the world is prosperity. So we've got to focus on making sure we can have a strong economy, and also we can have lower bills for households as well.
So do you think that under the last Tory government the net zero policy was wrong then?
Yes, I mean, I've said when I was in post that I was very worried about the costs, particularly for families and businesses. I said that repeatedly. I pushed back bans, for example, on cars and boilers. That was 3 weeks into the role. And Kemi, when the 2019 legislation, which was brought in to strengthen it, was one of two people in Parliament who spoke up. I wasn't there at the time, I only came in afterwards, but I think both of us have been worried for a long time that what we're doing is we're pushing costs onto people. And if you look at what Ed Miliband's doing, you talked about that £1 billion that we're spending on wasted wind. By 2030, that's going to be £8 billion. And he's also buying offshore wind this year at the highest price in decades. He's extended the contracts to 20 years, so he's locking us into these prices for decades. That is the last thing the country needs. What we need to do is focus on people's bills, bringing down the price of energy, and making sure that we can support businesses and the economy here.
Watching Keir Starmer this week in Labour Party's conference, you wouldn't have thought the Tories existed. He didn't really mention them at all. He seems to be obsessed with Nigel Farage and reform. It's almost as though they're the actual official opposition now.
Well, look, I saw some of this mudslinging that's gone on, and frankly, I think what people really care about is making sure that parties have policies that can address the challenges that they see in their lives. So whether that's immigration or, you know, their bills, if you look at everything, the cost of food, housing, electricity, those are the things that people are really struggling with. And so when it comes to us in our conference, I know I'll be putting forward credible policies in my area to look at how we can address some of those challenges in the energy space. And I think that's what we should be doing. I don't really sort of care what people are doing in terms of name calling and all those things. I thought, you know, Keir was quite mad, and I think it was wrong to sort of start banding around words like racist. And I don't think it helps anybody, frankly.
No, I don't think it does. It certainly doesn't help him, because it looks as though he's made a massive blunder, and in fact he's handed the next election to Nigel Farage. I've just been handed this from a speech that you made in 2024. You said this: we need to build every possible solar farm and wind turbine going, and that will deliver us cheap energy. Was that wrong?
So that was the speech where I said we need to build new gas power plants, I think you're referring to, which was very controversial. I was told by the department I shouldn't do it, and I said we're going to need that to keep the lights on, and that was the key point I was making. That's the press release I sent out. I think the targets that we had in government, I'll be very open about that, around wind and solar were actually in the wrong place. It was something that during my time I became more and more worried about. I asked the department to redo costings, for example, because I thought the numbers that they were using were bogus. So I was only there for 9 months, but in my time, as I said, I was already very worried about what was happening in terms of costs, and actually my period in government only made me more so. And that's why I think it is right what we're doing today to say we're going to repeal this act and we're going to focus on the key priority when it comes to energy is making sure that it's cheap, reliable and secure.
Do you think the Department of Energy is too powerful? You've just intimated that as a politician you couldn't get what you wanted.
Well, I think they've got the costings in the wrong place, and I think they are hamstrung by this legislation, which is why we said we need to repeal it. I think the energy strategy is completely backwards because at the moment the priority is squeezing every drop of carbon out of our electricity system, no matter what the cost is. Now, we've already got one of the cleanest electricity systems in the world, and if you just keep heaping costs on our system, all that happens is what we're seeing now is that industry moves abroad to countries which are still powered by coal. That makes no sense. So I think we need to completely rewire our entire energy system, frankly, and make sure that we're focusing on lower costs of energy. But also there's all the bodies around it as well. And what I wonder is who's speaking up for the consumer? Who is relentlessly focused on how you bring down those consumer prices? And that's what we are going to be. That's our role, and that's what we're going to pursue over the next few years up to the election.
OK. Michelle Mone on front pages this morning, she says she hasn't done anything wrong. She's given interviews in the past to say that she's being scapegoated. She's being told to cough up £122 million because of a contract, a bogus contract that was given to her by the Conservative government during COVID. Do you think you should regret giving her that contract?
I mean, I think it's a disgrace what's happened. It was also us, I should say, that started the lawsuit back in 2022, which is finalised today, which means that she has to pay back the money. So it's already recognised that the contract, which she didn't deliver, she needs to pay the money back. We've removed the Conservative whip as well, so she's no longer a Conservative peer. And frankly, I think people who sort of took advantage during the pandemic, when of course governments were having to move quickly and we were looking for help from anyone. I remember sort of the ventilator and the PPE scheme. We were looking for help from everybody because it was such a serious crisis, and you had Rachel Reeves popping up saying we should give a contract to a medieval costumer and all this kind of thing. But anybody who took advantage of that, obviously we must go after. And like I said, she's only paying the money back because we started that lawsuit back in 2022.
Should she be stripped of her peerage? I know she can't necessarily be stripped of it, but should she step down from it?
I mean, I think she should do the honourable thing and resign, quite clearly.
OK. Claire Coutinho, thank you very much indeed. Shadow Energy Secretary there, speaking about Michelle Mone, who's on the front page of most of the papers this morning. Cough up COVID. Great headline, actually, in the Sun, as you would expect, which says Baroness Bra Queen to go bust. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, says it all, really. Good morning, Mike, says Steve in Wales. Regarding Sky's Beth Rigby interview with Starmer, did I just see Starmer throw his bestie Khan under the bus to avoid upsetting President Trump? Well, maybe so. One from David, who says this about David Lammy. Accusing Nigel Farage of links with the Hitler Youth was not an error. This was a deliberate, duplicitous decision to lie and gaslight the electorate against reform. No person would just make up such a statement, especially someone apparently with a legal background. Please stop saying he apologised. He did not. His response to being caught out in such a disgusting lie was churlish and very well rehearsed. The man is a danger. Lammy is a gutter politician and is unfit for any office. He should be removed immediately. Well, it seems as though there's a lot of it about. There's a lot of people who should be removed immediately. Baroness Mone, Keir Starmer, David Lammy. One person who should not be removed and who should be, in fact, moved in to government is James Price, former Conservative government advisor. James, very good morning to you.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'm sure that a few cranks on the left would disagree, but if the public want me to, then I'm happy to serve.
Well, yes, listen, I mean, I don't know whether you'd have much luck with people like Claire Coutinho, though. She's very good at obfuscating the answer to a question. It seems to me that she's gone complete full circle on net zero, and I'm not sure anybody really cares. I know that you still hold a candle for the Tory party and you hope that it can revive itself, but I mean, to be honest, after watching Labour's conference this week, even Labour don't seem to be taking it very seriously.
Well, it's what I've been saying for a long time, that a coalition between the two parties of the right would be so effective, because clearly Reform is doing a lot of the running right now, has caught a lot of that radical zeal and excitement in the country for some proper change. But Claire, to be fair to her there, 9 months in a department at the fag end of Rishi Sunak's, I think, pretty rubbish premiership, did actually, making even able to say herself that you need to build some more gas power stations. I can barely imagine, having been on the inside of these insufferable government departments, how much effort that would have taken itself. And your question to her was exactly right. These civil servants are way too powerful. The fact that the Minister of the Crown herself had to struggle and fight, to be able to say something in her own speech, shows you how bad it is. And I think we do need, or will need, that kind of experience. Those of us with scars on our back of fighting what many call the blob will be necessary if we're going to get the kind of radical change that we eventually need in this country.
Yeah. I mean, do you think at some point or other during this conference coming up with the Conservative Party, there will be conversations going on about some kind of, sort of amalgamation of the right? In the sense of, if the left are going to do it, now we can see that Labour will do anything to stop Reform getting into power. The Lib Dems have already admitted that they will go into coalition with them if necessary. I mean, is it now time for the Conservatives to have a grown-up conversation with Reform and to just say, look, we can see that we're on the downslide. We can see that Reform are on the up. We need to talk.
Not to be too politician-y about it, because I will answer you directly, but my long-standing sadness has been that for decades the right hasn't been united. The fact that the Tory party, probably because of John Major, ended up being split on the issue of Europe and sovereignty more broadly. You imagine how much better it would have been if people like Nigel Farage and all those kind of patriots who were in UKIP in the day that got us that referendum had stayed inside the Conservative Party. You would have had a much more robust and right-wing grouping to have taken over the country and maybe saved us from the sort of horrors of Blairism earlier. I think when it comes to it now, we've got, 1 year from the last election and quite a long time still to go. I don't think for a second, by the way, that the election is going to be early. I think the Labour will cycle through a load of prime ministers to try and make it better. It won't, but they're not going to give up power anytime soon with that massive majority, because they probably realise they're never going to get into government ever again afterwards. So I think probably another year or so of the parties of the right knocking seven shades out of each other, competing to see who can come up with better, more popular, more radical policies is a good thing. The Tories getting sounder and more robust on immigration, I think, has stopped Reform from going soft, for example. I think if we can see good energy policies being developed by both parties, as you were just talking to Claire about then, I think that's a good thing. But you're right that I think that there will be a danger if things don't change in a year or so, and it looks like that the Reform Party and the Tories fighting each other to a standstill in so many seats is the one way that the left ends up staying in power. That would be a disaster, and something needs to be done about that.
Now, without wishing to drag you back to the dark old days of COVID, I just want to play this little clip from Michelle Mone. This is from a 2023 hapless interview that she and her husband did with the BBC. It was a very Prince Andrew-esque. Check this out. This is her saying she didn't do anything wrong.
I can't see what we've done wrong. Doug and the consortium have simply delivered a delivery contract of goods.
Yeah. The trouble was the contract of goods involved some masks which didn't fit and some gowns which didn't apparently work in a sterile manner. So she now apparently owes the state 122 million quid, but I don't think the state's going to get anywhere near any of it.
No, you're probably right. I mean, I should say that I was in government during those kind of early COVID days, and there was a real panic because although the civil service had promised us that Britain was the most prepared country in the world for a pandemic, turned out not to be true, of course, and that we were haplessly and hopelessly unprepared for it, and that there was a lot of desperation to go, crikey, we don't have all of this stuff on hand. Then you can see why, right? If the civil service says you're not going to need any of this kit, they would be criticised for holding a warehouse somewhere out there full of masks and gowns and all the rest of it, when that money could be better used on cancer drugs or whatever else it may be. So that was difficult, and there was a real scramble to go, right, can we get our hands on all of this kit we need, bearing in mind that the Americans and the French and the Germans and everybody else was also competing for all this, and there wasn't the kind of manufacturing capacity for all of this stuff. So I think that we should be forgiving of people who are trying to help, but if it was the case that this stuff was known to be completely useless, why shouldn't the money be sent back? That's obviously true.
Yeah, absolutely right. Whether or not they get it is anybody's guess, but it has brought a few memories back for people to remember how just crazy those times were. And people, I'm happy to take the plaudits, because we were the only station at the time who were actually talking about how crazy some of the stuff was that was going on. And of course now everybody agrees with what we were saying at the time, even though we were vilified for it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I was there in the early days, and it was terrifying. I remember being one of the early meetings before anybody was really paying attention, and the scientists come along and say, well, we don't know, but the worst case scenario is, and then they started reeling off stuff that we'd have to do, and I hope people have already had their breakfast, but it was things like change the law to allow crematoria to run 24/7. Yeah. Requisition all vehicles, trains, planes, automobiles, to stop the movement of people and things. I think my old college had a lake in its gardens, and that was going to be emptied to be used for buried bodies, all kinds of extreme stuff. And if you're a set of politicians, you've just won an election, you're knackered after all the Brexit stuff, and you've got these scientists saying, if you don't do this, you're going to have millions of people dead. Well, that does take you by surprise somewhat. And therefore, I've got a lot of sympathy in the early days and weeks and months. And I think the first lockdown, probably, although I think it happened too late, was not an entirely unreasonable response when we didn't know how bad things were going to be. Yeah. I think then, though, the system was so sluggish and so reticent to actually do anything about it. But the second and especially the third lockdowns, completely unnecessary. And I'll tell you a story one day, Mike, off air, about how I had a big hand to play in stopping a fourth lockdown from happening, because that's how desperate these people were still to keep us locked away and keep us dead.
I know, absolutely shocking. James, good to see you. Well, thank you for that. I'll look forward to that over a glass of champagne, perhaps, or something. And we can maybe have a Scotch egg with it, just to celebrate, what it's like. Let's get a voice note from Sasha.
Morning, Mike. It's Sasha from Cheshire here. Just ringing with regard to the Labour Party conference. It just seems whoever's signing off on these speeches for Labour has no idea about PR, because whoever thinks it's okay to agree for a majority of a party to have speeches going at the opposition in a childish, pedantic, pathetic way is just beyond me. Surely you would want the floor to basically discuss what you've done, how you've done it, what you aim to do next, and how successful you've been. But to stand there as the Prime Minister of the country and actively slag off the opposition, instead of doing that, whoever signed off on their PR needs sacking. Especially when the opposition is already ahead in the polls and already has, some great speakers and support behind it. It just seems so immature and childish, like being back in nursery. Great show as always.
Sasha, you're absolutely right. Starmer is completely and utterly out of his depth. Like being in kindergarten, you absolutely have to admit that that's quite exactly where he should be. James says this from Yorkshire. In some defence of Baroness Bra, he says there does appear to be an element of making her a scapegoat, an extremely easy scapegoat for the incompetence and stupidity of a whole host of people within government, the civil service and the NHS for the complete horlicks they made of handling COVID. I think that's right. An awful lot of people got very wealthy during the whole COVID thing, and an awful lot of people lost everything. That's where I have a problem. Coming up next, Will Geddes joins us, international man of mystery. He knows a thing or two about security. We're going to ask him just how difficult it's going to be now for Nigel Farage to get around the country and get around the world because of what was said about him this week at Labour Party conference. This is Talk.
next thing I'm waiting to hear is that the St George's cross representing St George, who was a Turk, is a representation of how much we love all the Turkish barber shops that are cropping up on every high street corner.
We are the only country in the world that teaches the emblems of our nation, our nationhood, of our culture, of our history, of our people, are racist.
Yeah, I mean, I think this teacher went on to say, if I read the story correctly, that the St George's flag or the Union flag are not intrinsically racist.
That's nice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 9:31, just about another half an hour away from 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer, of course. We've been talking about COVID a lot. We're talking about Michelle Mone a lot this morning. Cough up COVID's 122 million quid is what they're looking for, apparently from the late Baroness Bra, she's known. But we're going to talk a little bit now about security, because, of course, Nigel Farage right in the headlights this week, thanks to Keir Starmer painting what can only be described as a target on his back. We thought we need to talk about security. The only one man to talk about with that is Will Geddes. Will, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Let me just play you a little bit of what Zia Youssef said to us yesterday, revealed to us about Nigel's security being reduced in Parliament.
About it, but I think it is in the public interest that they know that just about 2 weeks ago, the authorities slashed the size of Nigel's security detail by 75%. The authorities cut Nigel's security detail by 75%. 2 weeks ago. That's why so many of us around Nigel are so worried. Now, I want to be clear and reassure people who, A, support Nigel, but B, all right-thinking people in this country who believe in sensible democratic politics in this country, that thankfully donors stepped in and have shored up that security, so Nigel is well protected. But the Prime Minister knows exactly what he's doing. This is a Prime Minister who's circling the drain, who, according to a poll this week, is the most unpopular Prime Minister on record. According to a poll this week, the majority of Labour members want to be replaced, and he's lashing out against the man that he knows. Starmer knows he cannot beat Nigel at the ballot box, so he's embarked on the most, I want to say it again, extraordinary, coordinated attacks to incite violence against the man who is the bookmaker's favourite to replace him at number 10 Downing Street. It's disgusting, and he should apologise.
Zia Youssef, the head of Reform Policy, strong words from him about the situation Nigel Farage finds himself in. I mean, you and I have known Nigel Farage a long time. He's a man that's had a lot of security over the years, but probably now needs more than ever. What could have made the Home Office decide that they should reduce his security?
Well, the official excuse, Mike, is that they do constant risk assessments, which I understand, and we do this in the private sector. You do constant risk assessments to see the ebb and flow of risk and profile and whether it's increasing or decreasing. So the big question now is, are they going to reinstate that 75% after, what the Labour politicians of various types and statures have been saying about Nigel Farage, and that he is far right, and that and they are in many ways.
They called him the enemy, didn't they?
Yeah, they're antagonising those parties that are already dissatisfied and firing them up to potentially be incited to violence. So, if I was responsible for that risk assessment process, and the question I would be putting to not only Nigel but to Richard and to the rest of his team is, show me that risk assessment. Show me the risk assessment that you've put together, because let's look at any other politician in recent years and how they have been vilified and how they've been targeted. I mean, Nigel's had his fair share of milkshakes and goodness knows whatever else thrown at him. What other politicians have had that in the last few years? And we look at Joe Cox, we look at David Amess. The threat is not diminishing. The threat is increasing in many ways.
Yeah, well, there's a guy, I think, we're not going to get into the case, obviously, because it's an active case, but there's a guy appearing, I think, in Southwark Crown Court in the next week or two, who is charged with threatening to kill Nigel Farage is a migrant who came over on a boat and recorded himself on a TikTok video saying, "I've come here to kill Nigel Farage." You know, there are people, and you'll know this because a lot of it never gets published, but there are probably threats every day. There are probably attempts more than once a week, perhaps, by people who want to get near him. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, you know, the problem with going out with Nigel now is that, you know, the security guards are always trying to put him into a safe space. They're always trying to get him off the street, into a shop, into a bar, into a sort of a
securable environment.
A securable environment. But walking down the street is a nightmare.
Yeah, and it will be. And I mean, he's talked about sort of holding, you know, talks in the street and interacting with the general public. And it's very important for an MP to be able to engage with their audience and with the people that they're trying to bring on side, or even those that are already supporters. But as a security professional, the biggest risk that you've got is those open-air environments. And we only saw it a few weeks ago with Charlie Kirk as a great example, which is why I find it really astounding. But one thing that I would throw into the mix here is that a lot of this personal security, he has, I won't go into details about what Nigel has, but there is his own security, which is supported by donors and by supporters. And then there is obviously the parliamentary security. And parliamentary security has been outsourced to a private security contractor, one of the big companies that does also facilities, cleaning and all sorts of stuff, and static guards. Now, I have some serious questions about the integrity.
And is that 24/7 security, or is it only when he's in Parliament or around Parliament?
I wouldn't want to go into detail on that, but to be honest, I would only put my trust in the inner sanctum of security that he actually has. That additional security, albeit is necessary, is I would question. I don't know the capability, but I do know the company behind it, and I would have some serious questions, certainly as I've heard allegations of individuals being assigned to tasks that are not licensed to do so. I mean, I'll give you an example, Mike. I mean, I have the times I go on the ground myself, minimal, but this is my close protection SIA license card. Every single person who's involved in his personal protection.
By police, or how's that issued?
No, it's the Security Industry Authority, and you have to be registered. You have a police check to make sure that you are qualified. There are SIA cards all the way down to the guy who will sit on reception, and that's a contract security guard. But in terms of close protection, you need to make sure you've got people who are qualified to do so, who've got experience and do it. So Nigel, I think, is in this prism of higher levels of risk right now, and this is only going to increase by Labour basically just fanning the flames of hate. And it's incredibly irresponsible. But whether there's been some injection by the Home Secretary onto that risk assessment, who knows, Mike?
Difficult to say, isn't it? But it's hard to get away from the fact that it could be a political manoeuvre by somebody who doesn't think Nigel Farage,
I wouldn't be shocked,
one, deserves it, or two, shouldn't be you know, using public money or something like that. Let's talk about Baroness Mone, because I seem to remember in dark days of conversations that you and I have had that you did some work for her at one point, didn't you?
I might have, Mike. I might have.
I mean, any idea where the 122 million went? You haven't got any of it, have you?
It didn't go to me, I can tell you that much. But yes, I mean, she's in a precarious position. Obviously, I would never talk about my own clients and what I may have done allegedly for them. But I would say she's in a very precarious position because there's also the National Crime Agency that still have an ongoing investigation. So not in addition to that 122, and I know you were talking with Chloe earlier, you know, she was making some very valid points on it of where they're going to extract that money. But I think the greatest concern is, will there be some sort of criminal charges actually followed through with? You know, the NCA have been on it. They've already seized her home in the Isle of Man. That's public knowledge. That property is worth a considerable amount of money, but that's by the NCA. That doesn't go to the 122 million.
So in this case, no.
So, interesting times ahead.
Going to be difficult times for her, and I don't think too many people are going to have too much sympathy for her, I'm afraid, but that's just the way it goes. Will, good to see you. Thank you very much.
Always good to see you, Mike. Thank you.
We'll have some lunch soon, I'm sure. Absolutely right. Coming up next, Isabel Oakeshot's here. We'll find out from her what's going on with reform after what happened this week in the Labour Party conference, and why Keir Starmer is so obsessed with Nigel Farage. What's wrong with him? This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 9:41. I didn't know the time was rushing along as much as it has been. We've been talking about Michelle Mone, we've been talking about Keir Starmer, we've been talking about net zero and the £1 billion a year we've been wasting on not actually getting any energy from the wind turbine sector, but actually paying them not to produce any, incredibly. Right now, though, it's time to talk about small boats and smashing gangs and all of that, because Isabel Oakeshott joins us, Talk's international editor. She's been abroad taking a look at what some other people do to stop the gangs. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, so I spent a few days last week in Libya, all places. It's not a place that many journalists actually set foot in.
Right.
A lot of people may remember that basically it was taken over by ISIS after the fall of Gaddafi, which is something that we, the UK, were pretty involved in making happen. And then we did what we normally do and ran for cover, and chaos ensued. So I was in the east of Libya, which is actually quite peaceful and safe and stable now. And I was looking at what they do when they're talking about smashing the gangs. They actually do smash the gangs, almost literally. I mean, the operations that they undertake are pretty serious. And why did I go to Libya? Well, because it's actually on the front line of the immigration crisis in a way that nobody's really talking about, because of where it is at the top of Africa. Right. A lot of illegal immigrants who end up in the UK have come through Libya from, for example, primarily Sudan, where there's a civil war on, and they flow up through Libya and do their best to get across the desert, all the way up through Libya, and then onto small boats across the Mediterranean. And obviously we only see them when they get to the Channel, but the problem is starting in Africa. And I wanted to see what it is that they are doing over there to try to stop it. Now, they could just be sitting back and sort of waving them through. After all, it's not their problem, the Libyans, if these illegal migrants are actually aiming to get to Europe. But they are working very, very hard to try to reduce the numbers. And they don't muck around, as you can imagine. They think nothing of deporting people. When they talk about stopping the boats is what they actually do.
Yeah, so they don't let them get on the boats, I suppose, is what they need to do, and they have to stop them from getting from wherever it is via Sudan or whichever part of sub-Saharan Africa to the port, I suppose. Because I remember doing stories some years ago of an awful lot of sort of aid ships, things like Save the Children would have a ship just off the coast of Libya, and as soon as anybody sort of took off in a small boat, they would go and rescue them, even if they weren't being asked to rescue them, and then they'd deliver them over to Lampedusa or somewhere, or Greece, with their own steam.
Well, so as you say, the idea is to stop these illegal immigrants ever actually getting to the coast, getting nowhere near a beach. And so much of the work that the Libyan National Army is doing is focused right down at the bottom of Libya, by the border with Sudan, near Eritrea, near where there's a sort of confluence of countries, and immigrants are all flowing in at that point. But of course, some do slip through. I mean, the numbers are actually enormous. So you then have another opportunity to try to stop them at the other end, as it were, the exit point, which is the coast. And they are doing their best in a way that helps the UK enormously, because if a Sudanese refugee gets as far as the UK, if they manage to get across the Channel, they have a 99% chance of remaining in the UK. We basically don't send anyone back to Sudan. Now, human rights people will say, campaigners will say, well, quite right too, Sudan has a civil war going on. But to be fair on the Libyans who will deport to Sudan, they only deport to parts of the country that they consider safe. They don't simply write it all off. In many ways, our approach to this is a bit unsophisticated, isn't it? We look at a whole country and say, oh, well, there's a conflict there. No one can ever go back there. The truth is that there are conflicts of some kind in a vast proportion of countries all over the world. And if you're not prepared to send anyone back to a country which has some conflict in it, then you're going to be keeping a lot of people, which is exactly where we found ourselves, isn't it?
Yes. And I'm assuming that you didn't come across any sort of, human rights judges getting in the way, or people suggesting that, you can't send him back to Sudan because he's got mental health problems.
There's none of that, I think it's fair to say. I mean, I had incredible access to immigration chiefs, to naval chiefs, to Coast Guard officials, all sort of managed, as I understand it, by the Libyan National Army. It's complicated in Libya. It's a country in two parts. Basically, the west side, Tripoli, is a bit of a basket case run by a bunch of warring militias. The east, Benghazi, where I was, is much more organized. And I was able to talk to a lot of people that are involved on the operational side of both smashing the gangs and deportations of migrants. Yeah. And they are more than aware of the insanity of how we approach this problem. I said to them, would you ever consider putting your detainees in luxury hotels? Yeah. And they just think absolutely bonkers. Right. Do insist that their detainees are looked after properly. I can't attest to that because I wasn't able to interview anyone who is in those detention centres. But what I would say is certainly on the Benghazi side, they are really trying to transform that city. They want Libya to move forward from a very dark and troubled past. And they're pretty acutely aware that human rights horrors are not a good look. So I think that they are improving the way people are looked after. They get healthcare, they get properly fed and clothed. But what they don't do is go completely over the top as we do. They're pretty grumpy about the fact that parts of Europe and the UK are behaving in such a way as to make our own countries, the UK in particular, a magnet. That is simply fueling the tidal wave of people that come up through Libya trying to get to the EU and to the UK.
No, of course. And I mean, there's a school of thought here in some quarters, mostly on the left, who say, what we need to do is to improve the lot of the people in these African countries so they don't want to leave. Obviously, it's easier said than done. But what's the view in Libya on that kind of sort of proposal? Would they welcome some help from the West to go into places like Sudan and Somalia and Ethiopia and make them better countries somehow?
So I'm really glad you raised that question, because I've always been incredibly sceptical of this, this left-wing argument. Yeah. We've got to tackle the problem upstream, the lefties say. You've got to, you've basically got to fix Africa. Yeah. I mean, I've always thought that's absolutely ridiculous. It's a complete counsel of despair. The UK cannot be trying to fix Africa, solve wars in Sudan, make Eritrea more wealthy. But what I think we could do is be supporting the Libyan authorities that are actually trying to help us. They are subject to sanctions. There's no beating about the bush about that, which makes their work very difficult. They can't have helicopters, they can't have drones. Many people will say there's a good reason for that. But I think it is in our national interest. Forget trying to fix Sudan, forget trying to fix Chad. But what we could be doing is working with good Libyan authorities and actually supporting them in their operational work to stop the boats. And I think they're very open to that. And, Reform's position on this is that Reform will work with any country that can help us solve our immigration crisis. You don't have to like people to do business with them.
No, exactly right. Well, I mean, we used to spend a great deal of time doing business with people we actively didn't like, and this idea that somehow you have to sort of be favourable to people and only then can they be allies of yours. I mean, Keir Starmer was in Copenhagen today and he's talking about going upstream to the Balkan countries, and get this is their great idea to stop people coming from the Balkans, and that is to go to the Balkans and say to them, why don't you just stay where you are? They're going to persuade them not to leave. I mean, what sort of policy is that?
Completely ridiculous. And this is what I mean by the whole, ridiculousness of a let's fix Africa solution. But we must be prepared to work with countries that are helping us stop people stop people from coming to the UK. And we need to be much more open-minded. You know, Reform got a kicking for suggesting that they would work with the Taliban. You know, and I understand why that sounds quite wild. But the reality is we are coping in the UK with a very significant number of both refugees but economic migrants from certain particular countries, and it is in our interest to work with the authorities such as they are. They don't even need to be national authorities. I mean, the issue in Libya is that it basically doesn't have a national government. It's got one in name, but it isn't really a thing. But why not deal with things at a local level, at a regional level? Because what do we need here? What we need is solutions. And what we're doing sure as hell isn't working.
No, exactly right. Let me ask you about your sort of musings on the week, because obviously it's been quite a big week for Reform. It wasn't their conference, but it seems as though it might have been. You know, that famous Telegraph cartoon that appeared, I think it was on Wednesday.
Yeah, brilliant cartoon.
Which was brilliant, saying, you know, I think next year we'll go to the Reform conference where they won't talk about Nigel Farage the whole bleeding time. But what's Reform's kind of mood? I know you talk to those guys. I mean, you're not affiliated with them, but you know, what's the mood in the party after what Keir Starmer came out with? And I'm just talking to Will Geddes there about the security issues and all the dangerous things that Starmer kind of created for them. In a way, I suppose you would say it's been a good week for Reform again, hasn't it?
I think it has been a fantastic week for Reform. I think Keir Starmer's speech, you know, it's a bit like a budget, a conference speech sometimes. Yeah. It can take a few days to kind of percolate and for people to work out whether that intervention, that performance was a good or bad thing politically for the party. And I feel that whilst the audience in the room for Keir Starmer's speech lapped it up, they loved it. Well, they wouldn't they? He's very much preaching to the converted. That speech has really backfired nationally because essentially, whether or not Keir Starmer meant to do this, he's portrayed an awful lot of people in the UK as racist or supporting what he characterised as racist policies. And that is incredibly offensive to a vast number of people who are quite decent and not remotely racist and quite simply legitimately worried about mass uncontrolled immigration. And this whole thing of ramping up the rhetoric, you know, David Lammy was obviously absolutely pathetic.
Crazy.
That speech, you know, suggesting that Nigel Farage was flirted with the Hitler Youth. No basis for that whatsoever. The ramping up of rhetoric is a serious matter. I just caught the tail end of Will Geddes, who you had in before me. And, you know, Nigel's security situation is a daily and nightly headache. You know, it is a really, really serious thing. He gets very credible death threats on a pretty regular basis, and much of the security has to be privately funded, has been for years. I've known for a while that the security had been cut back, but you know, it's not something, as Will was saying, that one generally shouts about. But there's a point to be made here, which is that politicians of his stature, but particularly Nigel, are very, very exposed to nutters. But I've always thought that of course, it's not just Nigel, and of course, it's not just senior Reform figures. You know, every MP is vulnerable. I'm afraid history teaches us that it's often, I'm afraid, or the cases that we've had, the tragedies we've had have not actually been the most high profile political figures.
No, absolutely not. And again, it's always unexpected, and that's the whole problem. We've got to run. Isabel, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor there, with her trip to Libya. Some interesting things to be taken from that. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, tomorrow. Coming up, though, it's coming up to 5 minutes to 10. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. We're nearly out of it, and we'll be back after this.